If you missed out on supporting the Kickstarter for In Search of Tomorrow, you can now pre-order a copy on Indiegogo. From director David Weiner and creative EC, the producers of In Search of Darkness Parts 1 and 2, comes a documentary celebrating 80s sci-fi. Follow the link below to secure yourself a copy before it ends on the 4th of May. Hello everyone, it's Oliver here, back with a new commentary, and this week my good friend Michael Peristeris is joining me to chat about the 1982 epic Conan the Barbarian. How are you doing, Michael?
Not too bad again, as usual, Oliver, just living the life, the extravagant life of lockdown and indoors. Like, how can you go wrong?
Well, as you know, obviously you're running your YouTube channel, your recent top 10 amazing vehicle stunts has performed pretty well on your channel and with your audience.
Yeah, no, people are liking that. Like, they're digging it, so that's pretty good. Like, I'm liking that. Like, I didn't expect it at one stage. It was like one of those things where I'll do a top 10 as a joke, and it's kind of overshadowed some of my other work. And it's like, okay, fair enough. I mean, people like it. No, people like it. It's great. I appreciate the love that I'm getting for it. Like, a lot of good positive vibes. I get crap for my voice. I'm sorry. What can I say? Like, this is who I am. Like, it's just, I've heard a lot of funny stuff. Trust me on that part, though.
Well, if you want to check out Michael's channel, you can find a link below. Okay, folks, if you wish to sync this commentary with your own copy of the film, put the timestamp to 0 and press play now.
Okay. 20th Century Fox.
Obviously, with this, over here in the UK, or maybe parts of Europe, it's distributed by Fox. In America, it's Universal. So hopefully things will kind of sync up all right, with people watching it over there. Conan's a movie I saw bits of as a kid, but because it was an 18 rated movie and released in like 82, so when you sort of saw it in the VHS shop to rent, it was kind of this battered old VHS box, and I obviously too young to rent it, but I kind of saw it properly and got into it when it first hit DVD in the UK. Okay. So it wasn't something that was kind of, I saw bits of it on TV, but it wasn't this kind of movie that was part of my youth. To say, I don't know, maybe the Terminator, which is probably a bit more accessible, I think.
Now, speaking of which, this often played double bill a lot on TV in Australia with Terminator. The Terminator would play first, and then this would play afterwards, so you'd always have to stay up late to watch this. But I just, no, this was actually quite a big movie for us. For us ethnic kids, us children of Greek migrants, we were like into this way back into early 80s, like maybe a few years after it came out. Like, some of my cousins named their dog, or friend of the family named their dog Conan, things like that. Like, it was that big, that those sword and sandal movies type thing, whatever they're called. They were very big, like Red Sonja and so forth.
Well, this was supposed to be, also you got Marco doing the voiceover, but and sort of revealed in the commentary by Milius and Schwarzenegger was that it was supposed to be Arnie doing the voiceover.
Okay.
Which is, there was a debate about if Arnold's accent was too thick to understand, and his confidence as an actor. But I think with Marco, or whoever pronounced it, or Mako,
I think it's Marco.
Marco, yeah, it does seem to sort of work better with him being his sort of, reminiscing about Conan and this kind of telling you as his kind of story about this man who lived maybe years and years ago. Yeah.
Just wanted to point out, to disappoint a few people and myself now that I found out, unfortunately, when it comes to sword making, because I had just a little bit of experience with that now recently, you don't cast the sword, unfortunately. That's one of the mistakes. Casting a sword the way you do, that's totally wrong. Where you melt the metal into a frame, because it just makes it so brittle. So, just putting it out there.
Because you put it on your channel, didn't you, ages ago, that you'd made a Conan sword, hadn't you?
Yeah, I actually made a duplicate of this sword, and that was like the first sword I ever did. Now, I'm not a sword maker. I can't call myself that because I have made one sword, but the point is I'm not as experienced. But I just remember saying, for years as a kid, even I wanted to make this sword. And I just remember, like, it was just such an interesting step where I said, okay, let me just watch YouTube videos and get the gist of it. And it took me about a year, but on and off. And eventually I did, and it's like one of those things where it's like I pressed even myself where I got to that point where it's almost good. Like, instead of bronze where I should have used bronze, I used aluminum because I didn't have the facilities to melt the metal I wanted, but I casted the wax, I did everything like that. And yeah, it's just mostly, I'd have to admit it, wanting to make a sword came from this movie, from this scene. I think a lot of people felt the same way. This is like despite it not being accurate in that respect, there are a lot of mistakes when it comes to sword making. You know, the heating, the dipping it into the cold like that would make it so brittle and such, where it just inspired a lot of people, and me as well. It's just such a beautiful thing. And the production designer, Ron Cobb, came up with the design of this one.
He did. I think he also revealed that he had shot some of this footage.
I think he actually directed the opening. He directed this opening. And he just designed it. And if anyone doesn't know, like, it's probably, if you've seen like a bit of behind the scenes, the writing on this sword that you're about to see now is interesting because it does look foreign text, but it actually does read, "Suffer no guilt, ye who wield this in the name of Crumb."
Oh wow!
It's just
Never
so,
knew
like,
that.
It's like it's upside down here, like the writing's upside down, but it is such the story about it's so great. The sword itself. But anyway, if you ever want to see it, you can go check on my channel. And again, it's my first sword, so if it's not that good, you know, I'll probably do better next time.
So you made Conan's father's sword, right?
Yes, I did.
Because Arnold owns that sword, doesn't he? The actual prop, like, of that sword. But I think Milius might own the actual sword.
No,
Conan
I think it's the reverse. I think that's the Atlantean sword, and Arnold has the Atlantean sword. This sword, I think Milius probably does have, but they've made a few copies. And,
I think they've made I think they've got a few copies on. Yeah,
variations of it,
just in case it breaks. Obviously, Conan's father was an ex-pro bodybuilder,
William Smith.
Yeah.
I think one of his claim to fame now, the number may be wrong, but I had to double check it. His claim to fame was breaking the record or doing a record of 5,000 sit-ups in one sit.
Whoa.
5,000 sit-ups. Like, it was massively, like, had the arms, he was so lean. And he had he was in Any Which Way But Loose with Clint Eastwood around about this time. Yeah, about 1980. He was just bare knuckle fighting with Clint Eastwood.
This is actually a pretty good blue screen. There isn't much. You can tell there's a little bit of colour fade, but I think for the time, they've done a pretty. I think ILM handled this stuff, so.
This is one of those blue screen situations where I don't think they had to do blue screen. I think they did it on purpose for the style, not so much the scenery. I mean, it can't be that hard to get someone on a mountain, have the cloudy sky in the background, and just do that. I think they did it on purpose. And it kind of works in that respect. It's like, it's giving it a different feel, because even the background's too clear where it should have been depth of field. It should have been out of focus. So I think it was all style in that respect, and I like it. It's got a nice feel to it.
I think they cast well as well for Conan, sort of, I suppose, the kid's likeness to Arnold as a kid.
Yeah,
I think
the kid, for example, like young Conan, he's still acting. Actually, he's a Spanish. His name's Jorg Sanz, and he's a Spanish actor, and he's still acting even to this day.
Oh wow!
And he's a Spanish native actor, so yeah, he's still doing pretty good for himself. But yeah, no, I mean the casting's good.
I love this bit here where his dad's like, it's like he's preparing dinner, but he's like making them snow. Snow for dinner, everyone.
Really? Really? I thought he was just getting, because I think he's a blacksmith.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, but it's like he's just like preparing all this snow. I don't know.
Now,
quite amusing.
I couldn't find it mentioned anywhere, but I thought this whole context of why they're raiding, because it is revealed later that the character Thulsa Doom, as played by James Earl Jones, he's obsessed with steel, like the riddle of steel.
Yeah.
And I think they got wind that there's this great blacksmith who makes these wonderful swords. I think that's why they're raiding this particular village.
Yeah, you could be right. Yeah, it's just down to his way of just conquering the land.
Yeah,
you know.
There's Franco Colombo, Arnie's mate.
That's right.
Under 200-pound Mr. Olympia in 1975, and also Mr. Olympia 1981 due to huge controversy. And there's a big controversy. Well, actually, I don't know when's the best time to get that. I'll find a way. But there's a bit of controversy with Arnie before making this movie, as he won the 1980 Mr. Olympia in Australia.
Oh, okay.
And what happened was he took a hiatus. He quit after winning 6 times the Mr. Olympia in 1975. So there's a bit of backstory to that, where originally he was supposed to retire in 1974, which when he was at his best, which he was at his peak. And they asked him to come back to do the documentary Pumping Iron. He did that. He was a little bit smaller, just a little bit. He won. He said, all right, I'm retiring, not doing anything. And then he became more or less the promoter for Mr. Olympia. And because he was getting in shape for Conan the Barbarian around the same time, he got cast, he was doing that. He didn't tell anyone, but 8 weeks before the competition, he started training to compete. Because he was training for the movie. And he says, you know what, I'll compete for the film. I'll compete for the Mr. Olympia. And at the last minute, even with the documentary with the film crew, he went and competed. And this pissed off a lot of people. He says, wait a second, Arnie's a bit even smaller than what he was in 75.
Yeah.
And, you know, he came back and he looked good, but you can tell he'd lost a bit of his mass. And people complain that, well, since then, it's been 5 years on, we've had other champions. The industry, this competition has progressed beyond him, and he's coming back worse than before, and he won.
Oh,
so
right.
everyone says, like, oh, it was all a setup. You know, it was all like...
It felt a bit fixed, yeah.
It was fixed, and the broadcaster didn't even... wouldn't broadcast that episode. They were supposed to broadcast the 1980 Mr. Olympia. Huh. And because of that controversy, they didn't. And then the next year, in 81, Franco Columbu had a massive accident in, like, 1977. He was doing, like, a TV strong personality type thing where, like, it had all, like, the actors from the 70s. Like, Lou Ferrigno was also there, and he was carrying a fridge on his back, and his leg broke.
Oh my
like,
God.
Terribly. It's on. You can watch it on YouTube, and his leg broke. He took a massive hiatus, and he came back to compete in the 81 Mr. Olympia, and Arnie was a judge, and it was clear that Franco had, like, Palumboism. I think is it Palumboism? I don't. Where it had, like, where his, like, his chest looked like he took steroids. It had, like, breast, and his leg wasn't there, and he won, and he wasn't considered the best person there. And people said, oh, Arnie gave his friend the win, and that really did a lot of harm to the Olympia competition.
Wow.
So there's a bit of backstory in that. You can go check it up. There's a huge backstory of that.
With this whole sequence we just kind of witnessed here, it's like I still find, like, the death of his father still quite brutal.
Oh yeah.
Today, because people getting mauled by an animal is always quite disturbing imagery. I just recently watching The Revenant, where DiCaprio gets attacked by a bear. It's brutal, absolutely brutal. This moment here, with Conan's mother, who's I think is a German actress.
Yeah, she's a one name actress. It's got one of those things, like Mako as well. You can't.
I have no surname.
It's I'm trying to remember.
It's a great moment though coming up, because obviously revealing the Thulsa Doom's kind of henchman. We got Sven there, who's like the great story about him on Predator just being able to lift people with his fingers putting their fingers under their elbows and lifting them up. And
Nadiuska, I think the name, or Nadiuska is the name, something like that. Yeah.
And also this guy's an ex.
Ben Davidson. Yeah, he's an ex-football. Yeah, ex-football player. Yeah. He's 6'8". Like, I didn't realize then. Like, it's amazingly. They did the opposite of what they did with Stallone, where they hired a lot of people taller than him. A lot of people on this movie, and especially in the second one with Wilt the Stilt. Yeah, it was like 7 foot something. And Andre the Giant, like everyone was taller than him. If you see some behind the scenes footage of Arnie side by side of Andre the Giant and Wilt the Stilt, he just looks so tiny in comparison. Arnie's not short. Arnie's like 6'2".
Milius cast his villains to be taller or just the same height, to sort of show that Arnie wasn't gonna, Conan wasn't just gonna be this all-conquering force that could take them down easily. He had competition, and James L. Jones is like apparently 6'4". It's ginormous. But I do love this moment here because it sort of little hints of his power, where he transfixes her and puts her in this kind of like this spell, and then she just just cuts her head off, and it's that shot which is so wonderfully done, isn't it? Directed by Milius, where Conan as a kid, he just see her mum head fall off, and she just leaves him and lets go of his hand. It's a powerful moment.
Look at his blue eyes, because I didn't notice that it was pointed out. Like, it wasn't something that crossed my mind. I said, okay, blue eyes. James L. Jones has blue eyes. Now, this is me thinking as a kid. It didn't bother me as a kid. Like, it's not something. When I mean bothered me, it's not something I thought. Yeah. Where it makes more sense when you're an adult. But they gave him blue eyes, blue contact lens, and they make him this deep, sympathetic, like, not sympathetic, just weird in that respect.
Yeah, his haircut's weird as well. He just looks...
Again, this isn't something I didn't know as a kid. Like, okay, just the weird haircut, the weird everything. And I think Milius mentioned he's supposed to, like, be from a race of human beings that no longer exists.
Yes, that's correct.
Different.
Because when you look into Thulsa Doom, he's from Kull. He's not from Conan's storyline. So Thulsa Doom, he's got his skeleton face, so he kind of looks more like Skeletor.
Okay.
So he's a mix of another villain from Conan. What was his name? I had his name written down. Is it Thoth Ammon, something like that? A servant of the serpent god Set.
Well, if it's Thoth Ammon, that's the villain that was in the second one.
Oh right,
Thoth Ammon, who was that? Yeah, I think it was the guardian of the crystal where they had to go get Thoth Ammon. Yeah, he was a wizard. Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, basically that's what he's kind of a mix of. With Earl Jones's character. So I suppose if you're an avid reader of Conan, the original books, you may be a little bit like, oh, that's not him how he's supposed to look. So there must have been some sort of frustration in fans. That's not him.
History's the same. Like, we talk about comic books now, they're saying,
yeah.
you know, but they always say, oh no, Superman wouldn't have worn that. He wasn't supposed to wear the black till then. He had the mullet. Da, 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 da. Even back then, they were doing it. I mean, this is like a prime example.
Yeah. Because you see, actually, I only noticed this recently, where you see his father and his mother's heads on spikes there.
Oh, you'd never noticed.
Yeah. Okay, I never noticed that before. I just thought it'd just be random people in the village, but as a close, attention to detail, they've actually put their heads on there as they departed the village.
No, I mean, I'd got in touch with the whole backstory of this film for many years. I always found it fascinating. I'm trying to think somewhere where I read it, where the sword actually was made for Conan, if I'm not mistaken. His father made that sword specifically for the idea that one day it would be given to Conan.
Sure.
Which kind of plays into the whole story, like towards the end, if you haven't seen this movie, where he breaks it. He kind of like he breaks that curse type thing situation.
I love the reading about the sort of what Robert Howard had created, the Hyborian Age.
Robert E. Howard, I'm sorry, I'm wondering who's talking about.
I forgot the E.
Well, no, at one stage I was calling him Ron E. Howard. I'm thinking, why Ron Howard? Oh, yeah, that guy.
The bald guy. But I love this. He's created this age which never existed, but it's such obviously with how he's written the character and how he's written this universe and how Ron Cobb has designed it. It feels like such a believable. This could have happened,
I love that.
They could have found these objects from that age where Atlantis was destroyed by the ocean. So yeah, it just seems to work, and it's a mix of. I suppose you see later on there's a bit of Celtic, there's a bit of sort of what was the other sort of drawn upon
Viking.
architecturally? Yeah, Viking. But
it draws from everything. That's the good thing. That's why they even mention if you want to do something historically or fantastical, give it some sense of realism, like it might have existed, so people are not too far away removed from it. Like things like this did exist, and the thing about they shot in I think Spain, Almeria, if I'm not mistaken, where they shot all the Clint Eastwood, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly films and all that. It's just amazing. It's probably the same area they filmed, yet it can easily be a medieval, not even medieval, just this fantastical thing and a western at the same location.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
It's just one of those things where it goes.
It's wasn't they because they said they planned to shoot in Yugoslavia, but there was some sort of political problem, so they stopped production for 6 months, and then started filming in Spain. This bit here is it the Wheel of Pain?
Wheel of Pain, I think it's called, whatever.
Yeah.
I only just realised recently, like the necklace he has around his himself all the way through the movie till he removes it is a representation of this. I didn't know that. I thought it was a different symbol.
I didn't know that either. No.
Yeah, I mean, but when you look at it from a distance, it is the wheel, and.
I love this. The reveal is wonderful, isn't it? The reveal.
Yeah.
You just see his legs just ginormous, and then suddenly he just lifts up his, floppy hair, and it's Conan.
Well, that's the joke about Arnie. People always mention the weakest part about Arnold Schwarzenegger was his legs because of his height. Tall bodybuilders have a lot of issues trying to get their legs really defined, well, at least back then. And it was just one of the things that even the other bodybuilders made fun of him, where they said, "Oh, don't worry, Arnie, no one's going to look at your legs." Never bothered him. But that's the funny thing. The first thing you see of him with his legs, where it's kind of like the weakest aspect of Arnold Schwarzenegger, the bodybuilder. And Ron Cobb mentioned like this. The funny thing about this wheel, it looks so heavy, where it's so made Arnie such big and strong. Where it's ironically is just so well balanced, you could easily push it and it'd do the full like 60, hit you in the back. As heavy as it looked.
Also, what the wheel is obviously the Wheel of Pain. It's kind of I suppose it's not a torture thing. It's more like this
grain.
slave.
I think it's a grain.
Yes, well, I thought. Yeah, I thought it must be something to do with that.
I think it's got to do with grain, whatever. Where it's basically like bugger it. But it's the thing about it's like the Ben-Hur situation where they tell Ben-Hur keep that hate. Hate will make you strong, and that's what basically happened with Arnie, where everyone else died. Like it doesn't explain it, but all the other kids, eventually died off because they couldn't survive. But Arnie was that strong. See the symbol around his neck.
Yeah.
Like I didn't notice that before, but that is basically, if I'm not mistaken, like it is representation of that wheel.
It's the Wheel of Pain merchandise, isn't it? Really?
No, there you go. Like you get your own necklace. That's it's part of the the job has its own uniform that comes with it.
Isn't that also he can be trained now as to be a pit fighter, isn't he?
Trained is a bit of a exaggeration at this point. They're just chucking him in, but I mean later eventually they train him.
Yeah.
I mean because it's funny because when you think about it now, he is basically a kid in an adult's body. Because he's had no real sort of training. At this point, until a couple of scenes later, he is basically like a child in an adult's body.
Mm. He has to learn how to fight, and he's just like, we get some classic sort of Arnie grunts, and when he gets when he attacks the guy, and I think he like breaks his arm, didn't he?
I don't know, but this guy's got his teeth are sharpened. You see it better with DVD and the Blu-ray, where you can see this guy's got his teeth sharpened. So just imagine.
This reminds me when I was a kid, because I played the Spectrum game, just called Barbarian.
Oh yeah, I had that too on Amstrad.
Yeah, it was so good.
So good. I love
just hold back and press the button just to make him do the spin and chop the head off. You have to do it every time. Try and time it so you chop the head off down to find them.
That might have actually been the first fatality in video games, in a versus video game. I think it actually is.
I think it is. Yeah.
I remember like the first time I did that, because we got that on Amstrad. Well, the first time I did the spinning chop off, and the little dude, green dude comes in, kicks their kicks, and I just remember calling my brothers, check this out, and you'd be sitting there like trying to figure out what you did. Watch this, and no, it's back down, it's this, that, and like it's really entertaining shit. Yeah, like, I couldn't do it, and then you finally did. It's like, oh shit, like, give us a go. Like, but I just remember that game. That was a blast. That was like,
I loved it. It was really good, and also the advertising was great, because you had this kind of like. This curvy woman on the front.
Oh,
with this,
why'd you say that? I know her name.
With the guy from Gladiator's Wolf.
Yeah, I know that woman's name. Like, she's a British. I think she's a British model.
That's right. And, Some sort of page 3 model, wasn't it?
If I knew we were going to talk about it, I would have remembered her name. Just for research.
It's just like the level design in a video game kind of represented. It just reminded me of Conan.
Well, that's the point. It obviously was really much based on Conan.
Yeah.
And
a lot of things were.
This was that era, I'd have to say, from Star Wars onwards up to about mid-80s, where this sort of stuff, Star Wars made its own knockoffs. A lot of people doing the sci-fi fantasy. Mad Max, after that, a lot of Italian duplicates. And Conan the Barbarian kind of started that whole barbarian craze. So you kind of had the best movies that came out first. And Indiana Jones started the whole archaeology craze. And it was in that era.
This was a great year for cinema, wasn't it? This year,
82.
You had the Blade one, you had Star Trek 2, you had
First
3,
Blood, Star
Tron.
Trek 2, Tron, Blade Runner, First Blood.
Poltergeist.
I'm trying. It was a very good year. Very good year. I won't lie. Like, I had a lot of stuff going on.
But do you think, because this was kind of seen as a fantasy action movie, it made a lot of money. So Hollywood was like, okay, well, fantasy genre is coming back in. Let's put a load of money in those fantasy movies. But most of them kind of either performed okay or underperformed or bombed. Yeah. We had things like Dark Crystal, Labyrinth, Krull, Beastmaster, and
Red Sonja. You had Conan the Destroyer. Yeah, Conan the Destroyer.
The sequel did all right, though. Did all right financially. But it's just a shame, because obviously we'll delve a little bit more into the sort of sequels and what they'd wanted. But it was just, this was the first out the gate and did the most money, and the others just seemed to not hit the mark. I don't think people lost an appetite. I don't think there's always an appetite for fantasy, but it's just getting the balance right. And
just a quick mention, because he's passed. The character you saw, that Asian master there, the sword master, was Yamasaki, who was the actual Arnold's and Sandal's sword master, who taught them how to fight with a sword. So they kind of made him into like a little bit of a cameo, put him in like that stoic teacher as well. So just a little bit of a quick trivia there. And going back to what you're saying, was it Conan that kind of kicked off? Because Ridley Scott also did the same year. What was the name? Legend, if I'm not mistaken. Was it 82? No,
that was 85.
85. Yeah, because he done Blade Runner the same year. Sorry, my mistake. Right, I'm just.
But there you go. There's another movie that didn't do that well. Excalibur did pretty well. So that was a year before this.
Yeah, Excalibur was 1981. My year. 1981 Excalibur came out.
So there was an appetite, and people. It was an interesting sort of genre, but as the 80s spawned this kind of new wave of movies.
They spawned their own low budget. So the low budget films spawned their own low budget films. That's the irony of it, because Hollywood was still making the big budget films. Like, I'm trying to think what else was going on, but because the Hollywood system opened up, because all the golden era people who owned the studios beforehand had kind of retired and moved on, you had companies like Coca-Cola buying 20th Century Fox. I'm just paraphrasing in that respect. I don't know what they bought, but I'm just saying like certain companies like
Oh,
Coca-Cola bought
Coke bought Sony. Or Columbia. They bought Columbia.
Columbia.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Columbia,
I'm just trying to remember who bought what. But the point
Gulf
is,
and Western bought Paramount, things like that. You know, yeah.
They bought all these companies bought these movie studios and didn't know what to do with them. So they started saying, okay, what ideas you got? Give him a couple of million, give him a couple of million. And that kind of started the whole thing with George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. And at this stage, it was like the same thing. It was like, okay, get the people from UCLA. And that's kind of how John Milius got involved. Where John Milius was good mates and had gone probably a few years ahead of him. But he had gone with George Lucas and Steven Spielberg around the same time.
And Coppola, wasn't it?
Yeah, Coppola, yeah. They were all about... Coppola was, again...
No, the Rat Pack, weren't they?
Yeah.
Cinema.
More or less. First dialogue of Arnie. Just a big on the table. That's the first words he spoke in the movie.
That's like a meme, isn't it? That's a famous kind of speech, you know.
Yeah, it's going
pretty brutal. It's pretty brutal, you know.
John Milius is a hell of a character. The more you look into the history of John Milius, just knowing what kind of person he was at UCLA or at the film school, and he's just a gun nut. Like people have mentioned, if no one's checked out, or people, I'm pretty sure by this stage a lot of people know the movie. Check out The Big Lebowski, or people who know Big Lebowski. The John Goodman character of Walter, where the character he plays is basically what they've mentioned is a mirror ripoff of John Milius.
Yeah.
Whereas I think you know more of the dialogue than I do. Shut the fuck up, Danny.
Well, Milius was had a knack for writing proper interesting dialogue with speeches, because he, the famous speech in Jaws where they talk about Robert Shaw talks about watching these men get eaten by sharks is all written by Milius. I think edited by Shaw. I think he had a play
he cut it down because it basically was, I think, originally written. I'm trying to remember if what was his name. Oh jeez, I forgot the writer's name from Jaws. I forgot his name. Anyway,
come back to you.
Yeah, it'll come back to me. It always does. Anyway, he wrote a couple of pages of dialogue, and I think it was, Robert Shaw said, "Oh, I can't remember all this. Cut it down." And then Spielberg sent it off to John Milius, and John did a quick da 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 da. It was good. It was very well detailed, but then Robert Shaw kind of edited it down even a little bit further, so to get it so I could memorize it. And just one of the most shocking moments, like the story there in that.
Yeah. Well, he was, he obviously, nominated for Academy Award for Apocalypse Now. So he was,
he wrote Dirty Harry. He did Dirty Harry as well. Like he wrote, I think he didn't get credit for the first one, but he got credit for the sequel. He definitely got credit for the sequel.
Yeah, it was. He was just like this kind of whiz at writing, and could churn things out really quickly. This sequence here is brilliant because I love. As a kid, I always thought, because he just goes Crumb, and I thought that was the god Crumb, but it's just it's just another king who had this sword, Atlantean sword, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, I didn't realize they're giants. I didn't realize that because it's kind of hard. You don't get good angles, but when you see behind the scenes, they mention these are actually giants. And when the sword that Arnie takes is from a king or whoever, it's just so much bigger. Now, this movie in particular is a favorite of my lecturer at university. And he said, if you want to make a movie, he showed us two examples. If you don't want a movie to be remembered, he showed us Lady Hawk. Use music like this synth 80s crap music. And he's playing it, we're laughing. And he says, if you want a movie to be remembered, and he played this movie. And he played the score from this scene. And then the opening, Basil Poledouris. Just the score of this is just timeless. And we haven't touched on him yet, but fellow Greek, shout out Vasilis Polydouris. I had to say it in Greek, but Basil Polydouris is just so amazing in this movie. The soundtrack is like out of left field because he only done one or two things beforehand.
Because he was a fellow student of UCLA, wasn't he? With
we worked with John on the Big Wednesday, the surfing movie. They kind of didn't really do much, but his score for this movie, it's just. This is probably what makes the movie timeless. And my lecturer was right. My lecturer, Paul, who showed us, notice the size now, you can see on this shot how much big it is compared to the sword, the skeleton. Yeah. But he was right where this kind of, as opposed to a synth score where a lot of people were doing at that stage, like what was being mentioned in Lady Hawk, this is timeless. And this movie right now, I can't find anything about it that makes it dated.
No, because it's an interesting score where it's not scored in a traditional way in terms of dramatic sort of beats. It's kind of these massive operatic pieces that create a really vivid image in your mind of
Yeah.
this world, and the way it sort of plays out. The whole film is just this amazing musical to
Yeah.
a certain degree. It's like you're watching. If you took out all the dialogue, it wouldn't matter because you know exactly what's going on in this movie. What makes this film so kind of special is
And the
that,
reverse is true. If you took out the music, it would destroy the film.
Oh yeah, of course. But
Definitely.
if you you didn't understand any of it, you know exactly what's going on just by how it's shot visually. Milius is such a great visual storyteller in this situation.
Yeah.
Polydorus, also went on to do RoboCop, Starship Troopers, but this is. I think people would think of the 80s. We often think of John Williams and Goldsmith, but Polydorus, this score, it's up there with Star Wars.
Yeah, and James Horner as well. James Horner was doing a lot, but James Horner was copy repeat in a lot of respects. Like, James Horner would go through a period for like 3 years where he'd cut and paste a soundtrack and then do a different style and cut and paste that for 3 years.
Yeah. There's elements of cues from Star Trek 2 in Krull, and then there's some stuff in Krull that's in Aliens. And in Aliens, the opening sequence where you see the ship from Nostromo.
He did in Patriot Games.
Yes,
yep,
exactly.
I know, yeah.
Oh my god! I was like, it's I've criticised Hans Zimmer for copy and pasting, but that was some of the finest copy and pasting I've ever seen.
Well, go listen to 48 Hours and then you go watch Commando. It's basically the same, the steel drum thing. But he went through that tune, and the same with Project X. You watch Project X, which he did. It sounds just like Aliens. So like, he loved doing that. And then again, Patriot Games sounds very similar to when he did Braveheart. He's so great, but the problem is,
it's still great scores, though.
Great scores, don't get me wrong, great scores. But he went through that period where, like, for 3 years, or say 3 or 4 years, he'd cut and repeat himself, then come up with a new motif, and then do the same thing.
Didn't Arnold get? Sorry to change subject. Didn't Arnold get bitten by those dogs?
Yeah, it was supposed to be like the first day of shooting. I think something like that. He's running up, and he didn't make it up in time, and the dog actually got hold of his robe or chain or something like that, and pulled him down. And he fell down the rocks. It was like the first day of shooting, and he got stitches. And he's like, I'm bleeding. And the director's like, pain is temporary. Yeah, pain is temporary. Film is forever. And he's saying, no, but I'm bleeding. He says, leave it.
There's a thing, wasn't it? Is it in the books or the comics where Conan is afraid
of magic?
Isn't it?
Yeah, that's Conan's one big thing.
It's his weakness.
Ironically, one of the good things that came out was in the 90s was Conan the Adventurer cartoon.
I never saw it. The intro was amazing.
The intro was amazing, but it drew a lot from the whole thing because they did mention Set, they did mention a lot of the snakes, so I think it borrowed a lot more from the comic. And one thing they did touch upon more, and also in the sequel, where Conan is his big weakness is magic, and that's the one thing about it, where Conan has that.
I like this moment here where he's sitting there and she just makes that fire, and Arnold's like,
"Damn, that's some good shit."
It's a crazy woman.
It's
funny though when he starts. She's obviously either one of them seduce each other, and when she turns into this witch or this monster, all her hair is blowing everywhere. So's Arnold's just goes right in the fire with you.
Man. This is I'm gonna save it in a second, but this is going back, this is probably one of those films, depending like your ethnic background or whatever, like for us, like I mentioned, Greeks, whatever, we'd watch this like as a family and cousins or whatever. And because we were a mixed group, like I was always the youngest, so there was always cousins that were like 13 when I'd be like 6 or 7. I probably watched this back when I was 5. And you're all watching there with your parents, and they're like, oh, yeah, this is a great movie. And the scene that comes up is that moment, I mean, there was a bit of nudity beforehand, but nothing too explicit. But this is this moment where your mum's turn to your dad and say, should the kids be watching this? It's got that moment where it's like, oh, well,
But you forget, don't you? You sort of forget that it's it is an adult movie, and I think it's very much a boys' movie as well. I think it's. You could in some way sort of, well, you could argue that it is. It's not. It's film's not for everyone in terms of its pacing. It's not. And its style, but I think it's I adore fantasy movies, and this is like the highest of the caliber,
I mean, it was R-rated, so you can't blame anyone but ourselves. It's like,
Oh, yeah. But it's, the cover itself is so like the poster for the movie is just
Frank
so
Frazetta.
amazing.
Yeah, was it Frank Frazetta? I'm pretty sure he did that one because he had done the Conan art beforehand. And
I'm not sure. You might be right, Michael. Yeah, I don't think it wasn't the Struzan image, was it? So, but it's a bit of an awkward sex scene, though, because Arnold doesn't know what he seems a bit self-conscious on camera, maybe. I don't know.
But the thing about it just goes like, it was the yelling and screaming at that stage. It's kind of like I was like, damn,
it is great.
Everything's changed. Like, get into it, Arnie. You might enjoy it.
His face. It's great.
It's some real crazy shit. It's out of left field. I won't lie, but it's like, again,
it's to show. It's a great way to sort of show that there is
magic.
something magic in this world, and we haven't really seen it that much. We only saw a little bit at the beginning where he sort of transfixes his mother, but this is the sort of first instance where we see there's something more out there that's beyond our reality. Yeah,
as much as it is like in that respect, it is a gratuitous sex scene, or whatever you want to call it. It does serve its purpose, where it's like we really get an introduction into magic, and also kind of leads into Conan's weakness of fear of magic. So it has its purpose, but it is a bit like, well, it's R-rated for a reason, so I'm not going to knock it in that respect.
It does feel like it's a little bit like, let's just throw in a sex scene. But it's also... It sets in the next motion of literally just round the corner. We meet his what will become his best friend, Jerry Lopez.
And Jerry, unfortunately, I only just recently found out he's actually dubbed. So I'm like, he's dubbed. And I'm just trying to remember who he was.
Because he did say he was, because he had no acting experience. He was just, brought in due to, John Milius is like, he looks the part.
Yeah, we always want to cast someone who looks like him. Why don't we just cast this bloke? Why don't we just? He's a good mate because he played. He was a surfing champion and he played in again, John brought in friends and he played in The Big Wednesday.
Yeah, I love this bit here. He goes, "Who are you?" Super die.
I am super die. Sab Shimono, I think the gentleman's name is a Japanese American, if not mistaken. The only thing I can tell, because he was a TV actor at that stage.
Who dubbed him? Who dubbed Jerry?
Yeah, who dubbed Jerry? Do you remember Waterworld?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Remember the bit where they're trying to give Kevin Costner like a woman to take with him, and there's this Japanese man who's like, "Oh, no man's been in the sea for so long would refuse a woman" type situation.
Yes,
that's him. That's the voice. And once you put that picture in your head, that image in your head, it matches the voice. So it's like, yep, now it makes perfect sense.
Love this little bit here. Is that they're sort of,
talking about
arguing about their gods.
Their gods. Why does food on movie always look so good? Like, I want to eat chicken right now.
Yeah, I know. But it would be so bland and plain because they've got no salt or to put on it or any sort of spices. You'd just be like, bah.
But I mean, that's what happens with a lot of Italian movies where you watch them like in Goodfellas, we're in the prison and they're just making that food. It's like, wow. It's like, Just something about food on film. It doesn't have to look as good as it does, let's say, at a restaurant, but it just always entices you like, wow, I want some of that food. And just the way they're eating their chicken, I guess they're acting like they're enjoying it more than it probably should.
Yeah. It's probably really cold as well.
Your God lives underneath him. Arnie looking up.
He's like,
you gotta.
I don't believe you. He's
but do you? Don't you?
He's got him there though.
But I will admit, this is the term again they use. I love this film's bromance, where this is not a sidekick like in the second film, where they had like Tracy Walter was playing the character of Malik, who was really the stereotypical sidekick. And again, when I was younger and I saw the sequel, the comedy sidekick, I was laughing. I was enjoying that character. He made me laugh. Where here, it's a very tight bond friendship.
The respect, isn't
there? There was a lot of respect. So there's no... what's the name? This is shocking because this is supposed to be a foreground miniature, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's foreground miniature, and there's camera movement, which makes it even more difficult to do.
I mean...
To hide.
It's just so amazing.
It's incredible, isn't it? That is literally like not far from the camera.
And there's the tower they climb, but ironically, they venture more. So they double back. I think it's a mistake.
Yeah, that's right. Because
they don't go.
Don't they? They leave here, don't they?
Well, actually, no.
Don't they come to another town and then it's nighttime?
Well, no, I need to correct myself because they do mention these towers are being raised in every city, so it's a repeat of itself. So no. It probably was a mistake, but it's forgettable. It's forgivable.
Obviously, Milius was in a scene here, wasn't he?
That was cut out where they were eating a lizard on a stick.
That's right. Yeah, he sold on it. Yeah, but also next cameo we have Ron Cobb sort of telling him about the towers. This is probably another miniature here somewhere.
See, there's it's
probably on top.
There.
It's probably on top. Actually, it's probably a miniature. I love it. I love how they're walking around and just like, oh, it stinks. You know, they just don't like the smell. Apparently, Arnold was saying in the commentary that when he's stumbling around, he does punch the camel, but he's supposed to be stoned, isn't he?
Yeah.
Don't know what he's been eating, or
Lotus. I think they say Black Lotus, and I'm not supposed to show enough about that. Here's Ron Cobb, production designer.
He passed away last year, I think it was.
Well, we lost Max von Sydow as well this year. 2020 last year as well. And the other tragedy that I checked, it is a tragedy, but what I found out is that a number of people had just died in the Conan related, died in 2006. So you had Mako died in 2006. Richard Fleischer, who directed the sequel, died in 2006. Basil Poledouris died in 2006.
Oh, man.
So you just had this big hit of like 3 Conan, because they were all in Conan the Destroyer as well, because Basil did come back to do the sequel.
He did, yeah.
But they were all like died in 2006, and thinking, wow, like that's a bit of a interesting, it's sad, interesting thing to think. But yeah, just.
It's good they shot those documentaries like 6 years beforehand.
Yeah.
Does he actually punch? Did he actually punch it in real life?
I doubt it, because like if you ever. I doubt it, because the thing about it, he'd hurt his hand more than the animal would hurt.
Because I think someone had also had a chain to pull the camel's head when he hit.
Yeah. But they can be trained very well. That's what's so good about it. They can be trained very well. But it's just their heads like so tough in that respect. Like hitting the bone would hurt his hand more than anything else. So going back to what you mentioned, saying how much this is it's a boy's film, it's a guy's film. Yeah, it is that. But don't also the character Valeria, they do show a lot of respect with her. Like she's a very strong warrior as well. Like there's no weakness to her in that respect. Again,
no.
So they're not being.
I was just sort of referring to in terms.
Oh yeah, who's the dynamic? Who's the audience?
Yeah. It's aimed at boys, who love things like Warhammer and fantasy and what we as a kid seeing the box art for Hero Quest.
Oh yeah. No, I understand
that's
completely.
Conan, on the front cover.
But I can still imagine this being a couple's movie. I can still imagine like teenagers, like 18-year-olds taking their girlfriends, and I'm not saying I can't imagine this like, oh, it's so boring, because there's a bit for everything. Because you get to see like got Arnold with a great physique, so it's not so one-sided in that respect. I can imagine you are right; it is more like a dude's film, but I just imagine this could be so easy back in 1982 to take your girlfriend, as opposed to like Blade Runner, for example, which is more like a movie buff's film.
Yeah.
Well, I can see this being popcorn entertainment for like couples.
What do you think about sort of Oliver Stone's involvement? Because I know his original script for this was like very much loads of fantasy, loads of mutants and things like monsters. So hardly any of that was used. And I think what they said was like the spirit of that script, kind of the tone of it, was in this film. And Oliver Stone had envisioned 12 movies where Arnie would come back every year,
like James
every
Bond,
other year, like James Bond. Yeah, I think they also perceived this as like Superman. Chris Reeve will come back and do one every couple of years.
People are a bit too ambitious in that respect when they come up with ideas like that. But can you imagine it keeping its interest for 12 movies?
Yeah, it'd be a tough thing to do. I think Milius was kind of more on the ball with a 3-story act.
Yeah, I think it was all on the ball with that one, because the thing about it is, it wouldn't be uncommon for Japan, because Japan did that very often, where they had characters like the one-armed... Oh, that's China, that's the one-armed swordsman. They did a lot of that. But Zatoichi, they did 26 movies over a span like 20 years. The same actor. So it's not uncommon in that respect, and the same Wong Fei-hong in Hong Kong. They did the Wong Fei-hong films where... And sure, with James Bond, but James Bond was a bit different in that respect. But in this context of like sword and sorcery, sword fighting, I doubt an American audience would come back every 2 years to watch 12 films.
Yeah, because if you get one that fails, then that whole plan has been skewed off. It won't happen. So this one was, about the creation of the sword and its strength, and I think Milius said was like the use of its sword, and the third film was like the consequences of the sword. So, and obviously by the third one, he becomes king.
King Conan,
that's what people still want to see. I think Arnold should have done that instead of focusing on these Terminator films. I think playing Conan would have been, a better fit to show that Conan had aged, but he was still powerful.
I think they mucked it up with the second one because it changed the tone so much, where it's where it kind of like ruined that sort of segment.
It did because Richard Fleischer is a very good director, but he was old school. He was like old guard filming this kind of I suppose a new sort of franchise, and you needed young blood, directing it, someone who's a lot of energy, like Milius, and then having this kind of old geezer come in and take over. And I don't fault the film and how it looks. I mean, the film looks really good, but I think the tone of it, I think De Laurentiis was trying to sort of make it appeal to a wider audience, despite this film doing really well. Conan, the first movie at the box office. So it appeals to, I think, the Marvel comic readers than the actual fans of the original source material.
A very common thing, which is a bit annoying when it comes to filmmaking, when it comes to like a subject matter that no one's got faith in, let's say producers like, all right, here's your money, go make your film, whatever. And then it becomes a success. Then the producer starts rubbing his hands. He says, all right, now it's so good. Here's my ideas. And they put so much into it, they kill the concept of the original style. And then they're like, they've only got, it's one of the things I'm really not happy about when it comes to the film industry, where they just come in and they bring, not uncommon, where someone's got this concept and say, all right, I'm not going to give you 40 million, I'm going to give you 20 million, go do it, and become such a box office hit. It's, all right, now I'm going to give 40 million to the sequel, and I'm going to chuck in my ideas, and it's never as good as the first one, and they blame other people and accept themselves. Where I think producers, you need a good producer to like know when to step back and let the director do his thing. Where
What's interesting is that the first movie was kind of had early drafts by Roy Thomas, another co-writer, but Roy Thomas had come from the comics and he would write the sequel, Conan the Destroyer. So that's still actually, at the time, a bit forward-thinking by getting the actual writers of the comics to actually contribute to the movie. Because when the documentary about Superman Lives was like, Warner Brothers were like, we're not going to get the comic guys to write this movie. Yeah. They write comics, But now it's all kind of, the comic writers actually do have an influence now. Because
I'm trying to think what comic book became before this one. I know there are a few sparse ones. So I know that it was Superman, obviously the big one that came out like 3 or 4 years, but it's like total opposite spectrum in that regard. The only other ones I can think of is Barbarella, which was a French comic book or graphic novel, if I'm not mistaken, that came out in the 60s. The movie came out in the 60s. I don't know who they got to write for that. But again, it probably was a bit more forward thinking in that respect.
I think Milius has followed the sort of the style of Richard Donner by sort of having that verisimilitude. Kind of like, you got to believe in Conan, you got to believe in this world, and that's what, treating the source material with respect, and that's what I think that's where the sequel kind of falters. I think.
They went a bit too far with that. See, this is going back to old school filming. Obviously, this is a fake snake, but that's real fake blood.
Big mechanical snake.
Snake, but I mean, I'd rather this over any kind of CGI thing that's like, look how real. It gives it that feel. Now,
when he cuts its head off, it's like, ugh, lops it off.
Well, going back to the realism, this is actually the scene you're going to see, arrows being shot, and it's John Milius, who apparently was the best shot at the day. But he's actually shooting arrows above Arnie's head. Those are real arrows. So that's as it could have easily missed.
Yeah.
But that's the point about it. Like, this is going back to like I love practical.
Yeah, definitely, mate.
Practical beats anything. But just
What did you? I love that. He grabs the sword, whack. But I love the
in one fluent, like he throws it, grabs it, whoosh.
It's just brutal, isn't it? I love it. What did you think of the 2011 movie?
What did I think of the 2011 movie? I can't remember if I saw it in the cinema. I think I actually did see it in the cinema. That's probably one of the few films I got bored and said, I might as well. What I think is, it's kind of bad for Jason Momoa, because had that come out a few years later after his Game of Thrones fame, it would have done so much better. So it's like, but this is going back to the swords. One thing that annoys the crap out of me, what Jason Momoa does constantly in that film, when he finishes a subject or discussion. He shoves his sword in the ground.
Mm.
He like puts the tip of it in the ground and walks away. It looks cool, but you know how bad that is for a sword? I mean, that's just terrible for a sword. You're just basically destroying your weapon. And there are moments it looks fake as. And that goes back to doing CGI. That goes back to doing a bit... I mean...
I thought there's visual elements that look really good, but I thought it was just like such a rubbish script. I didn't like it.
Well, it just feels like the first thing they got... you can tell like they got Morgan Freeman to do the opening narrations. Like, oh, who can we get? Morgan Freeman. Yeah, he narrates everything. Get Morgan Freeman. He'll make it good. Yes, he does. He does. No matter what you hear him in, but you can tell that's what they got him for.
Yeah, of course. Should have got Max von Sydow was still alive. Should have got him. That would have been great.
Max von Sydow. Oh, he's coming up pretty soon as well.
Yeah, he is.
And Max von Sydow had done Flash Gordon. He'd done Ming just 2 years before that. Again, worked with Dino De Laurentiis.
And he was, Max did it because his son encouraged him to do it because he was a fan of the comics. A similar situation with Langella.
Langella, I was thinking that I almost forgot the name from Skeletor. And then when the kids saw them, he's like, so what? And it's like, I did it for you little bastards, and you still don't give a shit. But again,
she goes after the big jewel here, doesn't she? She's like, no, you can't have that. You can have an even bigger one.
Yeah.
I think the long hair does suit Arnie. It does. Yeah. I think is that his hair? I think it's his natural hair.
Yes and no. He grew it, but it never got long enough, so he did add extensions, but very little. Like he did grow his hair out a bit. I'm trying to think where you see it best. I think towards the end of the 1980 documentary, for the end of Mr. Olympia, he's talking back, and his hair was a bit longer, but it never got to the full. But no, actually, he did have long hair. To be fair though. He did have long hair in the 70s because there's an episode of him on Johnny Carson.
Right.
And I think that was the first time they were going to do the Conan, where they were getting prepped to film it, and he did have his hair long.
This took like 5 years, didn't it, to get into production?
He did grow his hair long once, and you can see it in... because it looks different when he's longer. His hair looks a bit more like James Earl Jones's did in this one, where it was like a bit more flat to his body, not as puffed up. But again, that might have been without any kind of special hair treatment for a film. But yeah, he did grow his hair long, then the film didn't work, and then he cut it short again, then grew it long, probably didn't grow it long fast enough. So I think there are some little bit of extensions.
Oh, the love scene? With the music here, it's a really good love theme that Basil's created.
But isn't that kind of good to see side by side? Because this one here is less gratuitous in that respect. But the gratuity in the other one, like we mentioned, had a reason because it was more like evil witch, sorceress, and such.
Yeah, it's a softer scene.
It does feel more, and this does lead into love in that respect. It is much more romantic, you might want to call it in that respect, as much as a R-rated film can be. But the music, again, Polydoris knows when to hit the right stride. Because even though these characters...
It's one of the best love themes, I think.
Yeah, and the thing about it is because these characters have so short time, come towards the later part of the film, the end of the second act, where they're so willing to die for one another, you believe it. Where in normal circumstances, like really they had one sex scene, they only just met, and they're that deeply in love. Where I think the music sells it. These characters, especially her towards him, and as we find out in the sequels, him towards her did really fall in love.
Yeah, I mean, obviously when but they burn her body, sorry. Music there, it's just like proper swells up, it's really like epic. But yeah, he's found an equal, you know what I mean? And it makes it for him to find someone of her again, to find someone similar, it becomes a huge challenge for him, doesn't it?
It's just weird the way, it's like they cut out mid-sentence in this segment here because the reaction... It's like they might even cut out the dialogue where he says, It's like
he's decided. It's kind of like a scene where he's decided to leave her or something. He's got to go, but I don't know.
I saw it more like I decided to stay. So, and that's where she's like grateful, like, oh, he's decided to stay. That's why when he does leave, his mind changed because he's found what he's looking for. It goes back to his original pursuit.
But now he's just more concerned about just partying and drinking and enjoying his wealth and.
Well, that goes back to the whole thing because before this moment. He had one pursuit, and that was to find, even when he went to the witch, the two snakes. He's looking for the Thulsa Doom thing. And he's found something else, something more enjoyable. He's found wealth and pleasure.
He's happy.
He's happy, and he's like, you know what? I've got it. And that's kind of like, he can't walk away from it, because when the opportunity comes and he hears about it from the King Osric, Max von Sydow, he's right back into it.
I love this bit.
Yeah.
Face straight in a suit. Oof.
See, that's I don't know if it's common with now. Like, I don't think they've got the real good balance of comedy and action. Where the Marvel movies, I think they go a bit too far now, more than ever, with the comedy. Where Josh Whedon, I think, goes a bit too far with his comedy, and I think that's kind of like where the balance is. Like in movies like this, depending, again, that's PG film. This is R, totally different. They do bring the right moments, the right comedy. In this
I think it's what you come to expect from certain Marvel movies. It's like Ant-Man. Okay, you expected there to be comedy.
Yeah.
Thor was kind of, at first it kind of wasn't, and then it sort of developed into this comedy where Captain America's kind of played more straight. So it depends on sort of the character, but having elements of comedy is always a plus, I think, for everyone.
Yeah.
But when it goes a bit too far, it's like, oh, I wish they'd taken this character a bit more seriously. Yeah. Conan's got a nice little balance of comedy where its foot is down on, like, this is a serious kind of action movie, but there is elements of levity, to it.
The sequel did the exact opposite, where it was a little bit too much comedy, not enough action. So I guess the middle ground would have been perfect throughout the whole series, but I think the first one's pretty good. I mean, I think this is the right tone for the series.
Oh yeah,
this is kind of like Superman 1 compared to Superman 3. You could argue.
Yeah,
Conan,
definitely.
Like this, Superman, the first film was Superman 3 compared to Conan the Barbarian to the Destroyer.
Well, even if you look at like Conan the Destroyer to like Red Sonja, the same team making the movie, Richard Fleischer again, and the same production team. Yeah. It's such a fucking mess. It's like Arnold has always famously said he'd, if his kids were being naughty, he'd punish them.
He'd make them watch
Red Sonja, yeah. And he's not even called Conan in Red Sonja. He's just
Calidor.
Is he Calidor? Yeah.
They couldn't get the rights. But the thing about it is Red Sonja is another Robert E. Howard thing. But there's a thing about where this Red Sonja, it's a female from comic book. Because the Robert E. Howard is called Red Sonja with a Y. Where the comic book, 1970s comic book that came out after the Conan comic book in Marvel is Sonja with a J. And there is slight differences, so it's not exact the same. So believe it or not, Red Sonja is a female-led comic book movie.
Yeah.
So if anyone says, Marvel had never made a female-led comic book movie until Elektra, I think it was. And I don't know if Tank Girl's Marvel or not. But no, Red Sonja's...
I think maybe Tank Girl, maybe Dark Horse, maybe? Or, I don't know. But these... I think, didn't Red Sonja come out the same year as Supergirl?
No, I checked that to make sure. 1 year difference. I think Supergirl came in 84 and Red Sonja came out in 85.
Right, okay.
And Destroyer came out in 84.
It's a quick turnaround, isn't it? With Red Sonja,
Well, that's why Arnie wasn't really much in. I think basically they were in production.
He wanted to get out, didn't he? He wanted to get out of that contract with De Laurentiis.
Well, he was supposed to do Terminator beforehand. Before 84, he was supposed to do Terminator. And what basically happened was De Laurentiis had him a contract for 3 films. Or 2 films, either way. And he says, no, I've got him, so we're going to do that. And it's because, that's the cool thing, because of I love how everything's connected. Because De Laurentiis did not release Arnie from his contract, and he had to do Destroyer, James Cameron had free time, so he did the script for Aliens.
Yeah.
Or was it Rambo? Rambo 2.
Might be. I think it was a bit of both.
Both, yeah. I think a bit of both, because he did the script for Rambo 2. So I think that's basically what happened. Was he had basically started on Terminator, done the script, and he was ready to shoot, and they wanted Arnie to do it, and then there was a hiatus, like a 6-month hiatus before he could get Arnie back. And his Galen Hurd, his wife at the time, I think said like, what can I do? And he got offered to write for either Rambo Part 2 or Aliens. And I think she said, take him, do the writing. And I think that's basically what happened. So
yeah.
People will correct that later if you look up, but either he might have done both Aliens and Rambo Part 2 or Rambo First Blood Part 2. So yeah.
That scene there with Mac von Sydow, they had shot a scene where he got killed, didn't he? Because Thulsa Doom's men had found him, and I think they couldn't get the death scene right, could they? They couldn't burst the blood packets that are on him on time. It just became, when they did do it, everyone was sort of broke out laughing. So it was just like, let's just drop the scene. So we don't. Yeah, he was supposed to die, but I think it's better that he didn't, because he saves his daughter, and she gets returned to him.
Yeah. I'm glad he didn't die either.
See, now Conan has to go back. He has to complete his mission now, doesn't he? He has to go back on track and defeat Thulsa Doom.
Well, you can see he's right back into it. He's right back into the whole thing. He's like, he remembers why, you know.
He was born to kill him, wasn't he? That's a sort of.
It could say it's his manifest destiny. Basically, he's the one sent by Crumb, to destroy this,
I looked into Crumb because it's just it's loosely based on sort of Irish sort of pagan god, or pre-Christian Ireland, Okay. But it was something to do with human sacrifice and worship, but was ended by Saint Patrick, apparently.
Well, you got deeper into than I have. Like, I didn't look that far into it. Like, I'm like, okay.
I just kind of like, it's interesting, because like Tolkien, he'd create this amazing mythology and history to everything, and Robert E. Howard kind of did a similar thing, and in a short space of time, and he committed suicide in 36, I think, after the death of his mother, or
he was a weird one. That one, like hearing the stories about that was pretty weird.
He's apparently completely bonkers, wasn't he? Milius said, and but he didn't find much success at all in life until later on. It was often the case with writers, isn't it? And even artists, they find success in death, and had his, I think it was Cole was first, then it was Conan in Weird Tales. So he had created a lot of stuff in a short space of time.
Yeah. Now here he is. He's gone off. He's done his own thing.
And now, obviously, Arnold's now going on his mission. Now we find he bumps into what Milius called a bunch of hippies, wasn't it? Which was quite.
Well, basically, it's like, flower power. You got your typical, Huh?
But no, it's what Peter Jackson would do years later with Lord of the Rings, where you've got this. Obviously, it's in the book as well, but they're sort of traveling across the land, loads of running. And obviously Conan has these moments where it's just loads of locations of him just walking along and talking to people. It's just amazing vistas, isn't it? Amazing use of location.
Yeah. I'm curious how much, because from what I've known, a lot of this location has not changed. So I'd be curious to see how much it'd be worth going back making a movie there. I'd like to do that. If I had the opportunity to do like either a Western or even a sword and sandal type Conan type film, I'd like to see about going to this location again. Why not?
Do you think that the Thulsa Doom and his followers, where we come across them very shortly, is a sort of comment on the sort of the religious groups they had during the 70s and into the 80s?
The 60s and 70s, yeah. Well, that's the thing. Have you seen recently the Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
Yeah.
It's scary because that's pretty close to accurate. And that's, if you just look at the history of Charles Manson, some people are just so susceptible to stupidity.
Well, there's a few documentaries, kicking around outside of Charlie Manson. There's these people that sort of create this this religious group. They bought their own land, and they all sort of lived off the land and tried to avoid things like money and so forth. But there was just loads of those kind of popped up during this period, and I just thought maybe that was their sort of little nod to what was going on.
Oh, no, I think it's definitely a nod to it, but we're talking probably more towards where Milius's time in college in the 60s and Lucas's and all that was the Vietnam, burning the draft card, hell no, we won't go. It was that flower power, free love 60s type thing.
And Milius was totally against it, wasn't he? Because he was always, whatever the popular thing was, he was like, no, I'm not following that. That was his attitude. I love how this I love how these kind of like These like skeletons of horses and stuff just stood there and just died.
Oh no, they're not stood there. He posted them up to look like what's the name?
Yeah, I know. From a distance, you trick you. I think.
From the distance, yeah. But that's the good thing about it. It does its purpose. From a distance, you're like, oh, there's people there. Let's not go. The great Marco, finally in person. Was it Mako? I'll say Marco because that's how I've heard him say. His name.
He had a massive fan base, didn't he?
Well, he'd done a lot of films. I think he'd done like 160 films before he passed away.
He did a lot of voiceover work, didn't he? I think he did the voice of, was it Splinter in the animated Turtles, wasn't it? Also a bit too
No,
later
not
on.
the series.
Oh, not the series.
He did it probably in the movie. Probably in one of the animated movies, I think TMNT, maybe.
Possibly, yeah.
I don't want to quote me on that because I just I didn't check that, to be honest.
Trying to think, because he popped up quite a few animated cartoons and stuff. So
yeah,
but I love his character in this because he's just like completely loopy, but he's a powerful wizard, And he's always unsure if Conan does die in this or he's kind of just on the cusp of dying.
I think he's on the cusp of dying, and the thing about it is, as much as a wizard here, he doesn't do much sorcery in so much. Again, it's keeping it's a hard word to say.
Verisimilitude.
Verisimilitude.
Yeah.
Where in the sequel, he really was like a magician.
Yeah.
He did a lot more magic. He did a lot more. He battled with another wizard. So for here, it's more like, you could say it's an older religious type person who knows a bit of sorcery. So how he writes on Conan's body.
Yeah.
He knows some old secrets. Whereas come the sequel, he's basically is a wizard.
Yeah, they push all the visual effects, don't they? With this one, they're trying to keep the effects to a minimum. And you already see actually some really good sort of animated rotoscoping.
Oh, yeah.
The demons trying to take Conan away.
This movie has a great balance of when to use animatronics, when to use visual effects, when to do animation. I like when movies do that. That's one of those things. I can't find this film dated. There's nothing in particular. You could say the animatronics for the snake looks a bit stiff in places, but even then, it looks so good. Especially the James Earl Jones snake. That looks so realistic. I'd be scared to be near that.
Yeah. That's the beauty of shooting something that's set in the past, isn't it? Where it doesn't false the trappings of technology. It's not surrounded by technology of contemporary times.
And that's where the Jason Momoa film really dropped the ball.
Well, it's just so much CGI, isn't it? It's overdosed. And it wasn't.
He looked good. He looked good as Conan. I thought he was probably the closest thing you could get. And if his popularity had been what it was in Game of Thrones when they did that movie, it probably would have got maybe a better director, a bit of extra money. It would have probably done a bit more serious. Where bad timing in that respect. But I think in terms of Conan, he probably looks more like Conan than Arnie. Because I think Conan was a black-haired individual.
I suppose it may sort of look more closer to this sort of the classic paintings of Conan, or maybe the comic strip. But I don't think he quite had the
physique.
Yeah, and just the screen presence of Arnold.
Well, not many people have the Arnold physique anyway in Hollywood. There are very, very few, and even those who do, they don't look the same. Like what's that wrestler that's in that new Suicide Squad?
Oh, John Cena, yeah.
John Cena. He's got a great body. Looking at the way he's just so lean, so built and ripped. Nothing compared to this one, which is ironic because come the sequel, it was the director of that one, Richard Fleischer, who approached Arnie, says, you know what, I liked how you looked in Conan the Barbarian, but can you look the way you do? He didn't even know how to pronounce it. Can you look that way so your muscles are more defined? And Arnie's like, so you want me to be more lean, more ripped? And it's, yeah, sure, yeah, whatever. And that's where Arnie looks very good in the sequel.
Oh yeah, he seems like he can move around quicker.
Yeah, he's toned, but here it's more realistic. Where here it's like you believe he's just a naturally big bloke. Where in the sequel he is more of the comic book. He is more of like the Frank Frazetta.
Yeah.
So
like
I think in the sequel,
one, isn't he? He's just like pure power. But also, he also had to tone down his biceps or his pecs, whatever, because to spin the sword, because he was just too big, to sort of...
People don't realise that Arnie moves very well as an athlete in terms of, like as a bodybuilder. He does move very well in his fluency, because if you see a lot of bodybuilders who don't focus on their aesthetics, they're very stiff the way they move. They're very stiff. Where Arnie, he did a lot of aesthetic exercising. He jogged, he swam. So there was nothing limited in that respect. So when you see him do things like riding a horse, running, compared to other bodybuilder movies, like when you see the Barbarian twins and so forth, other big people.
Oh, the Conan.
They're not as
Canon Films movie.
Yeah. They're not as fluent in their movement. They're not as balletic, or whatever you want to call it. Where Arnie was a bit more of an athlete.
A bit more agile.
Yeah. And again, it goes to who you cast. And going back to Sandel Bergman, who was a dancer before. Like that's pretty much what got John Milius' caught his eye, because she was in all that jazz, I think, with Roy Scheider.
He said she was a Valkyrie, wasn't it?
It was a Valkyrie. I can't remember. Did I mention during the commentary that she did like her own Terminator movie?
No, you mentioned before we started recording. I thought it was quite amusing. Yeah.
Well, basically, she did this low-budget, straight-to-video 1987 film where it was a Terminator ripoff, where it was a female version. I think in the States and the UK it was called Program to Kill, where in Australia it was called The Retaliator. I mean, it even sounds like they're going for it. And I think basically what she played the role was she was supposed to be like this Middle Eastern assassin sent to kill some CIA agents. And she sent to Greece, and she gets killed. And the CIA rebuild her like a cybernetic type thing, like a $6 million man bionic woman type thing, to go back to kill the people that sent her. Yeah, well, the bionic woman.
Yeah.
But that's basically all I remember. That was an R-rated film. The only thing I remember from that film as a kid that shocked me, again going back, I watched these films probably too young than I should have. But the one thing that shocked me, where there was this like mafia guy or whatever, he was on the car, he was talking on the car phone, and he was saying, "Oh, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, blah 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 blah." And then she calls him back because she's monitoring. And when he picks up the phone, she does this high-pitched screech, and he blows his eardrums.
Oh wow!
And and it causes him to crash. But she does this high-pitched mechanical screech, and you can see the blood come out of his ears, or his ear, and it causes him to crash. That's the one thing I took away from that film. That's how forgettable it was.
This sequence here, I mean, the amount of extras they got is incredible.
Yeah,
it's must have like raided the entire town to come and work on Conan.
See, I don't get films anymore. People, because go for inflation. This movie cost $20 million. So for inflation, what's that? That's something like $60 million.
Something like that. Maybe just sort of double, or maybe add a bit on top of that. Yeah.
Yeah. See, I can't get where people now say, "Oh, we need $100 million to make a movie like this." Now here they'd say we need $100 million budget.
Yeah.
They'd say that, and it kind of deters a lot of people. And then they would CGI all the people in. So with less, they could do so much more back then. This is what I can't figure about Hollywood now. Why have they lost that? It kind of deters people.
They like to do, especially with the big tentpole movies, is to get a huge budget, but also it gives producers a lot of free way to sort of change things, and if they don't like it. So if you're doing everything with green screen, you can just change things around. It ends up looking,
I don't know.
It ends up screwing.
I don't know. A lot of it, I think unions did a lot of damage as well, where one person can do 5 different jobs.
Yeah.
And that's something that they got after Tarantino for, because that's what Tarantino does. He do like a few different jobs on a set. That bothered, where unions now like, no,
well, everyone's got an assistant now, haven't they? That's the thing.
Yeah, everyone's got an assistant. The assistant's got an assistant. Well, I think that's what was one of the. That's why these movies have an appeal, and that's why they went to Spain, they went to Yugoslavia, they went here and there to do these films, because you can do so much more. And again, all these extras like so easy. Oh yeah, for them.
Probably the dollar probably went further as well at the time. So
yeah, that is also that as well. But Australia was doing that at one stage as well. Australia had no problem getting one person to do 5 different jobs, because people were willing to put the effort in to say, okay, I want to make this good, so let's put the effort. Like even Mel Gibson, the set of Mad Max. He's helping pack up the stunt equipment, the boxes and cardboard boxes and all that. So everyone chipped in.
Yeah, I mean, and that sort of gives a bit more of a sort of team effort behind it all.
Well, that's what I think films should actually be. It should be, you should all be proud of what you're doing, where you want to involve yourself in it and not be so worried about, oh, how much money am I going to get? Oh, I don't want to do this. But again, I don't blame the people who are hired. It's just the way the system is now, and it's kind of deterrent. And I just love to go back to doing these sort of films. Even myself, like, as I've done a bit of short film directing here and there, but I'd love to somehow just get the right people involved and say, let's do it. Because look at even this here. They built this whole set. That's just amazing.
It's an incredible set, isn't it? I think they were quite happy to see it burn at the end. It would have been great if that survived and that was still there.
Well, they did that with Popeye in Malta.
They did, didn't they? Yeah, still there.
Where they got abandoned it, and they said, well, let's make it a tourist attraction.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And that kind of like, yeah, that's the island of Popeye now. It's like, that's one of the big things. That's the town of Popeye. I don't know if there's a deleted bit coming up here, but without context, Arnie's reaching for his father's sword. And I didn't notice it until recently. So there's a missing context.
What, this sequence here, or the bit where
they're beating him up.
Right. Okay.
You'll see it in a sec. He's actually trying to get his father's sword, so they know who he is, or something happened.
Oh yes, you're right.
You just saw the hill.
Yeah.
So there's got to be context where, who is this guy?
They had released a few deleted scenes from the movie, but that clearly wasn't one of them. And there might be a production shot somewhere where you see something extra.
There are production shots where you see the sword.
Oh, you do? Okay.
But you see the sword much clearer, but there's no explanation why.
I do love this speech here, though, when he just tells them about the difference of power between steel and flesh.
Yeah.
You know.
Again, going back to Charles Manson type thing. Before he was this, this one thing, and now he's this big guru that everyone's willing to die for him.
Conan's a bit of a plonker, though, isn't he? Because he just goes into this religious
it
group,
wasn't a thought out plan.
Just holding this thing to get through this necklace.
But here's the thing, Conan by this stage is so well educated. He was given the best teaching. He was given the best warrior. So technically, as much as he is stupid as he is, he's been taught the way of warrior. Like he's been taught the concept of war, which is how he wins at the end. So he does show he is intelligent, but his plan was not really very well thought out.
No, it wasn't. No, I suppose he's been driven by his emotions, and he should be just about. I don't know. Conan's built around anger and strength, isn't it? It's all about revenge. So.
Well, that's going back to, I think, the hero's journey, where a lot of films have lost this concept now. In a lot of the films, they've made a lot of their heroes indestructible, where there's no falter. Where if you look at a lot of these movies, same with Rambo, the First Blood, same with Mad Max and all these characters as well, we're going back. The hero has this point where he suffers, where he's on the brink of dying, and then he comes back stronger. And that's something I think they've lost a bit of that with the action heroes of today.
Yeah. They don't get that sort of jeopardy, for them to, be on their last legs, or, they're going to lose.
Exactly, and that's something that loses the audience.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a good arc, isn't it?
It's an arc that works in a lot of films, because then you want the hero to win. You see the hero at his lowest, and you know his mission. But without any kind of low, when it's just one flat tone. It just this scene has always a bit bothered me in that respect, where it's like,
so they're all under his spell, aren't they?
Well, that's the problem with fanaticism or fanatics, where the correct terminology is. A fanatic is just so. Any context, any fanatic in general is just You
can't talk sense to them, basically.
No, you can't.
They're blinded by their own nonsense.
His speech here, like you mentioned, it's so great. We're talking about what is the flesh compared to the hand what is steel compared to the hand that wields it.
It's incredible, and it's sort of imagery of Christ as well, where he's just it's like this sort of scene you see, like him getting beaten up by the Romans, and then he gets crucified, and then it's like that sort of Prometheus thing where he's gonna, that sort of tale of him getting pecked, his liver or whatever getting pecked by.
Okay.
Vultures or whatever, then it repairs itself. That old tale of Prometheus and the Greek gods, whatever. And this is kind of, I suppose you could, look at it the same way. I do love the tree of woe.
The tree of woe.
Woe.
But this was lifted from the comics.
It is.
This actually was lifted from the comics. I was surprised about that because, see, I don't know about you. Did you ever get into the comics at all?
No, I didn't. No.
Well, what happened with me is I didn't get into the comics either until I went to Greece. And by that stage, I was already like 16 years old. And I would, at that stage, I had my own little coffee shop where I was doing, making it for work. And I was just like a little cantina at the place where my brothers worked and whatever. And my suppliers, where I picked it up, they used to sell cheap comics. And they had reprints of the old Conan comics.
Right.
But very cheap. We're talking about like 50p, less than that, way low. And they were in Greek, so I couldn't read it. So I just watched a lot of it. And one of them had like the crucified scene in it as well.
Oh, nice.
And he's just sitting there, and the guy's like just crucified. He spits on, like Conan's spitting on him, like as they walk off. Like, I don't care what's gonna happen to me.
I love this bit here. He just goes, just bites into the vultures, just spits out the feathers. It's great.
So apparently that was a real, that was a dead vulture.
Yeah, he have to have like a jab, didn't he, afterwards to sort of...
No, I had a gargle.
Oh.
They had like a disinfectant gargle. It was that worried about it. They were so poisonous. He was like, what am I biting into here, guys? It's the real deal, but please take this gargle and don't swallow. So again, this is going back to making movies. As risky as it is, no one should risk their lives for a movie.
No. Look at that
There's
shot.
that sense of
Incredible.
effort. That is incredible, yeah.
There's Roy Thomas has said in regards to the comics, that the books weren't in publication for a long time. There's some sort of licensing or sort of disagreement between the owners and the publishers. But so the Marvel comics were the only ones around that you could read on Conan. So I think that's where the fan base had developed of that period. But I didn't know much about Conan outside the movie. I'd like to read the original stories or the sort of tales of Conan. Maybe I might have to pop down to my local comic book shop when I open up soon and see if I can find anything that sort of gets all the great stories of Conan into one book. That would be fun.
Yeah, that would be. I like this scene, just the music kicking back in. Like, was it a
mirage?
Was it a mirage? Was it whatever? And again, this is going back to bromance. I love this whole the partnership of these two. Like, that's for me. That's what a friend is.
Oh yeah.
He's paying. Not only is he paying back, saying I owe him a debt. He's doing it because they're friends.
Oh yeah.
And this guy could have taken the wealth and gone, but they've gone back for Conan. And even towards the end, where there's a deleted scene. It was deleted in the original theatrical release, but they brought it back where Conan's saying, I remember days like this with my father in the spring wind. Do you know that speech I'm talking about?
Is this in this cut?
It's in this cut,
right.
Yes, but it was in the original cut. They thought that Arnie wasn't delivering the dialogue. I thought he delivered it quite well,
Is that
and I
when
thought it was very poignant.
Fire?
No. This is after they're getting prepared for the battle.
Oh,
and Arnie stops for a moment and enjoys the spring wind.
Yes.
And he's talking about, I remember days like this where I would go with my father out into the forest and we'd pick wild blueberries. And he says, have you ever felt such a wind? He goes to his friend and he says, yeah, they're in the heart of every man, And he says to him, it's not too late, you can leave. And Subuntai's like, no, it'll only bring me back here. But anyway, the point is that scene is so poignant, yet they deleted. I think the producers deleted. They said, just get to the action. And Arnie's not a very good linguist, whatever. He doesn't speak very well. Just delete it. Well, I think it was... I'm glad they put it back in.
Oh, yeah. I love this.
Yeah, so this is based...
Marco's just going...
So this is based on a Japanese horror franchise, I think. Or either a franchise or a movie.
Right.
I'm trying to remember what it is. I think... Oh, jeez, because I get so many confused with Ichi and Kobayashi. I get confused with... I think it might have been Kobayashi, but I think it might have been... I can't remember what the... Anyway, it was based on this character that the ghosts were going to come take. And these priests, in order to protect him from his soul being taken, they drew all these symbols on him.
Oh, right.
And they forgot to do his ears. And the ghost ripped off his ears because that was the only thing he could see.
God.
I saw the trailer for it. It looks cool. I actually want to go see the movie now because I completely forgot about it. And I think it just recently got re-released. It's from 1965, something like that. And it's based on a Japanese horror series. And it just looks so good. And it's like, wow. Because there's this cool special effect where the ghost comes in. He can't see the body at all. The body's in meditation sitting up. But he can see the ears.
Right.
So the body's like see-through, like, like the weird, how you make something clear on film where you can just see the figure. But the ears are so clear. So he goes to rip off the ears. So I'm just trying to remember that, like, in particular. What
so you think Milius is kind of inspired by that for this sequence? Is that you're implying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, he mentioned, he said it. Yeah. He said this is where I got it directly from it. Hochi the Earless, I think it's called, from 1965.
Oh, okay.
Or Hoichi the Earless, whatever. But if you type in Hoichi the Earless or Kobayashi and type in the Earless, you should find it.
This is what some of the great ILM work kicks in now. It's probably the only extensive visual effects shot in the film.
On the DVD, you could see with and without.
It's funny watching it without, isn't it? Because she just pratfalls over Arnie in a minute,
Yeah, and it's good to see the actors acting. They're putting their effort in.
Yeah.
Like this character, Sandel didn't really have much career after this. She did come back for Red Sonja. She had the option to play Red Sonja, but she wanted to play the
villain. I mean, it's a
she
bit
played the villain.
I just thought it's odd. I think the producers weren't being smart there. It's her character's dead. The fans would know that she's returning to play a different character. It just doesn't in my eyes, it just seems a bit sloppy.
I think that Red Sonja would have been better with her instead of Bridget Nielsen. I think Bridget Nielsen really brought that film down a few too many notches.
She can't act.
she can't act. It's stupid. I just some of the. I'm thinking. She's King Gudrun, where? Like this. Oh, I just want to.
There's some funny lines of dialogue.
I want to switch off a movie I'm not watching. That's how much I hate it. Like, oh, where's the remote? Oh,
yeah, but if she came back as Red Sonja, though, Michael, you'd be like, oh, well, she was, the love interest in Conan. Isn't it supposed to be set in the same universe? Why is she Red Sonja?
Yeah, I know. It's kind of a bit odd, that respect. But, I mean, so many people have done it before. Like, again, going back to Mad Max, Bruce Spence came back to do the gyrocopter.
That's true, but that's also just like, even though, us, we're fans of those movies, like, as continuity just gets thrown out the window. It's like, obviously with Bond, you have, like, Felix Leiter's being played by so many different guys. Like,
not only that, like, some of the... who was it? She played a Bond girl twice. One of the only few female actresses.
God, what she's...
The sweet...
she the man with the golden gun and Octopus?
Yes.
Like that.
I'm about to say a name. I know it's on the tip of my tongue. Damn it. Well, every time I say it's on the tip of my tongue, I think of the Married with Children joke where Peg says, "No, I bet it doesn't have long to live then." When she's talking about, I was like, "Damn, it's on the tip of my tongue." And she's like, "Then it doesn't have long to live."
Married with Children.
I love that show. I'm watching it lately. It's so good.
It was a good show.
But anyway, yeah, it depends because and not only that, some characters not only her.
Maud Adams,
that's the one.
Yeah.
That's the one. Not only her, that other character from You Only Live Twice. He had a very small role. He gets killed where James Bond finds him, and then he plays Blofeld in Diamonds Are Forever.
Yeah, true, yeah.
So it's not uncommon.
But this will be so close to each other. That's the problem.
You're probably right.
I think it's kind of sloppy casting.
But I think with the red hair might have changed it. If she had the red wig, it might have made people think she's a different character. But we'll never know. But Red Sonja's got an amazing soundtrack. Ennio Morricone, that opening score.
Because he was originally suggested to do Conan, wasn't he? By
probably
De Laurentiis.
Was. I wouldn't doubt it.
But John Milius was like, nope, it's got to be Basil.
And speaking of Basil, this for me is one of the best scores. And not only that, it's a very great scene. Like Conan's back to life. This goes back to the hero when they're at the lowest point. They're almost dead, and they come back supercharged. You might want to say, where they're more determined, more focused.
Yeah.
And they've got that bit of extra life.
I love how he spins the sword around him. So
everything, just the posing, is so good. The music, the setting.
The sword still looks too small for him, doesn't it? Because he's just so big. I think the power sword for Dolph Lundgren. Now that's a sword. That's massive.
Yeah, but again, sword makers would say how impractical this is. And even the sword that I made it to specifications. It's basically exactly the right dimensions, the right weight. And again, I made it out of iron, where it's not. These swords were made out of stainless steel, where they'd have a different weight balance to it. Some stainless steel, some fiberglass. This one here looked a bit lighter. Where even the one that I've got, it's so heavy. It's 3.7 kilos, 3.5 kilos, somewhere around that vicinity.
Yeah.
And you can tell how impractical it is. It would be good as an executioner's sword for hacking, but not for fencing or sword fighting.
Right. Because if they'd blocked it, you'd just be like...
The weight.
Yeah.
But again, it goes back to a barbarian being a big, strong man. Only a big, strong person could wield these swords.
Yeah. Broadsword.
I didn't.
There you go.
Yeah. That's one of the biggest weaknesses of Red Sonja's. The swords look terrible. Conan doesn't have this. Calidor, Arnie, whatever, doesn't have this sword.
Well, the sword's terrible, Michael. There's like plastic ones you can get from like a joke shop.
Well, no, you can tell they were the way they were built. They were molded.
Okay.
Or was it molded or casting? And it's just not a good casting. Because if you look at the cast, it doesn't look like steel. It looks like something else. And they've got a metal design on it that seems very bland. So both Conan, Calidors, sorry, I keep saying Conan, Calidors and Red Sonja's are just not good compared to these swords. Compared to the swords made for this film, no.
It just plays into Red Sonja's kind of rush production, wasn't it? And just like De Laurentiis cutting corners.
Yeah. But shot in the same location too. So they got a lot of things right. I think if it had been a different director, if they got a different director, if Arnie had come back to play Conan, and if not Sandel, I keep saying Sindel, if not Sandel, maybe someone else. I can't think of who else could have been Red Sonja then. What female actress could have played the part?
I'm sure we put it. If you put a list of female actresses at the time, you probably would have.
How about Virginia Hay from Warrior Woman from Mad Max 2?
There you go. You know what I mean?
I think she might have been able to play that role.
Yeah.
She's not a bad. She was a better actress than bloody Bridget Nielsen. In my opinion.
I think, as you'd highlighted, I think we discussed earlier with Richard Fleischer, I think these movies needed younger directors who are hungry for work and hungry to sort of to just demonstrate what they could do and just have fun with it, and not just be this kind of gun for hire who just kind of knows what they're doing, get it done quickly, so get it in a can and then they can put it out there. It needs that's the diminishing returns of sequels, wasn't it? It was just kind of like this kind of factory like kind of process, or just you've got the world created, then just do it on the cheap and just kind of repeat themselves to a certain degree.
There's the balancing act where if you're not going to get a young fresh director, you got, because that's not always necessarily the way to go, not always, but if you get an older director at least who's familiar or a fan of the actual material,
it does help.
And that's where I think it works. When you get someone who's much more of a fan of the material, they're more in tune with it, and they might have a bigger history.
Well, but we've seen it in terms of like, when you look at science fiction, we saw the Black Hole, like Disney's attempt at Star Wars, where it was directed by a lot of the old guard, directors, and you just look at, and it just shows you they're completely out of touch with what was kind of cool and hip, and what was happening with filmmaking at the time. I
always compare that with Transformers and GoBots, where if you look at GoBots was Hanna-Barbera. And you just look at that compared to Transformers, which was a new sort of like, it was from Marvel as well. And it was like new younger people in that sense. You just see the apples and oranges. It's totally different because GoBots just feels so dated and so out of touch with the sound effects, everything about it. And I think that's what you're right, where it's like when you get someone who's so outdated, not in touch with something, especially science fiction, they lose that.
Yeah. I love the makeup. And obviously, because Super 7 have got some figures coming out soon. They've got a couple out already, but there's 2 Conan figures coming out, which obviously they're doing 3. One where Arnie's in the pit fighter outfit. Yep. And then there's the one where we saw a minute ago where he's kind of come back from the dead and he's sort of training with his sword. And then there's the makeup on him. So I was like, oh, which one should I get? I got the one where he's kind of, he's back to Conan and he's like, showing off his sword skills.
Well, that's basically what NECA did back in 2003, 2006, somewhere along that. It was nearly 20 years ago, let's just put it that way, where they did Conan figures, and the sculpting was just amazing, but not very posable. They're more or less like statues. Right. They're the same size as what they produce now. But they go for a mint now. And I remember I could have bought some. They had the pit fighter Conan, and then they had this version of Conan. I think they had 3, maybe 4 versions, and one was like a bronze statue-looking Conan. Right. But they were so well crafted. Now they go for a mint. Yeah. They go for like a couple of £100. I still want the £150.
Still want the NECA RoboCop where he's sitting in a chair. That's Hot Toys. Hot Toys are very expensive, and
Hot Toys are too expensive. But that RoboCop, the face is so good without the mask as well. That is just so detailed, but they're like £600.
It's like 600 quid for the RoboCop in his chair.
Yeah.
So that's the collector's market, unfortunately. But when I've got money to piss away, I might get that. But I'll probably piss off my girlfriend. I love this bit here where you see like the guys stirring the pot.
They got the orgy going on.
It's a very unsexy orgy, really. Everyone's just like, they're stoned and just like, I can't be bothered. But you see,
but that's that's the point of the orgy, mate. When you don't have to worry about anything else, like I'll have sex when I feel like it. We're basically with us, we're like
the mind is willing, but the body's sore. It's like
it's time, snoo. Yeah. I'd say, please, ladies. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is battered and bruised. It's time, snoo. Can't we just cuddle? No. I sentence you to death by snoo. Yeah! I won't say the next line, but geez, it's so funny. I love that bit. Oh my God, my face is turned red now. Oh, jeez. I need a drink. That's one of the best scenes ever.
Oh dear. There's a bit there where the lady had gone up to the pot with all the food in. She just like takes a scoop and then just grabs her hand and just goes, just eats a bit.
That was totally oblivious to me when I was a kid. I didn't realise that was people being strung up. I just, meat, animals.
They're eating their flock, as it were.
Yeah, that's basically what they are, cannibals. Stone out of their mind. So this is paradise. Even this is pretty cool. This is like a rubber face, but I can believe it. I mean,
yeah.
It's close. It's probably a bit more believable than the Terminator face a few years later.
Oh yeah, the Stan Winston one where he's looking in the mirror, isn't he? And,
Yeah.
that still freaked me out as a kid when he popped his eye out.
Oh yeah, that really freaked me out as a kid. But again,
but this whole sequence here, there's only a little bit of sound effects, but it's all just this musical number.
Palidurus, yeah,
which is just incredible. Wait, nowadays they just wouldn't do that at all.
They wouldn't do that. No, I was just thinking that. I'm just thinking they gave Basil, sorry, they gave Basil free reign.
They did.
They say play the music here. Not many musicians get that. Not many composers get that freedom.
Well, they just drown out the score a lot of the time with just sound effects. You'll just have a lot of just this whole sequence would be done differently now. Which
and the irony is his young daughter helped him with this.
She did, yeah.
Yeah, she stepped in and gave her own little tune over his, and he overlaid it.
Pretty incredible. Which I think she also was a player on Starship Troopers. I think she helped out on that.
Look at that fake snake. Unbelievable.
They got the tongue right, didn't they, as well?
Yeah, everything. I thought that was the real deal at one stage.
I thought it was real at first.
But that's a fake snake. Just the build-up. Looking all just...
I love the bad guys because they look a bit gormless. We've got their mask on, so they've got their jaw slightly to the side. So there's slight, I don't know, it's ogre-like, I suppose.
Yeah.
And when they're sort of their body, how they're posing is all kind of leant over, hunched,
Yeah, they got that Golden Axe type of thing going on.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Golden Axe, man. You know when doing
Thorson dies?
Yeah, he gets stabbed.
Yeah, that's the sound effect.
Yeah.
And not only that game borrowed a bit from First Blood. They got David Caruso's oh God, when he gets stabbed in the leg, and they got that character that falls out of the helicopter. They got those sound bites and they used it, so no one got paid for that.
There's a great soundbite in the arcade of Death Adder, the sequel they did. At the end, you hear Death Adder scream, "Damn!" He goes, "Damn!" But they've sampled it from Ninja Turtles when Raphael loses Casey Jones. He goes, "Damn!" in the city.
Wow.
They sampled that. It's crazy.
Well, I know, we can talk about that forever. Like Streets of Rage, I think Streets of Rage 2 sampled Yosemite Sam's laugh.
Come on. Oh, nice. See, that's good. That's a good death. I love how they've choreographed Arnie and his companions, different styles of fighting.
Again, Conan, going back to the whole barbarian thing. Fake blood, as fake as it is, even the color, you just got to appreciate that it is at least, tangible. It's there. I can't stand digital blood.
Oh no, I hate it when they did that. They got rid of the squibs, didn't they? I love the squibs.
Yeah, they got rid of the squibs.
Total Recall. It's like the guy on the escalator just gets blown to bits as Arnie uses them as a human shield.
Think, and he's just sitting there. It's like, geez, you got to feel sorry for just some random people.
Yeah, you do get heavily bruised by those squibs. But
yeah,
it just doesn't. When you watch Expendables and they use digital squibs and stuff, it just looks awful.
So, going back to my first short film, I mean, when I wanted to do a whole setup where I was going to do an actual practical squib. And I went online, YouTube, to find out how to do it. And I got this pump to do it in a clear tube. And I got my mate, and he stepped in. And this was cold winter as well. And I just remember I put the tube under his shirt. And it was supposed to explode. And the testing worked perfectly. Every time I tested, it worked perfectly. I said, wow, that looks so cool. I'm going to do it. It never worked. It just dribbled out. And because it was winter, it just dribbled down his body. And I had to put digital blood splatter. I regret, that's the one thing, because I spent a while making that fake blood. I'm upset about that, because it was unfair to him as well. It was cold winter, and I just remember the thing it was sticky blood, and I'm thinking, just get it over and done with.
I love that bit there when they see Arnie, and he just goes, you. I love that.
Nightmare on Elm Street 3. It's always good when a villain recognizes someone like that, where it's like, you. Freddy Krueger did it with the Nancy.
Yeah, it's great. I love this bit. I love it when because he gets knocked out, right? And then Sven just looks at all the damage, just like, what? That was me. It was me. This hammer did that. It's great.
Sven just pops up everywhere in Arnie's films.
Oh yeah, it's even things like Mallrats. Playing like a security guard. What's he, Running Man?
And he was also in The Quick and the Dead.
Oh, nice.
What? Huh?
Love it.
So here there's a few issues, because Sandel had an issue with the stuntman, not a stuntman, an extra, where as they were sword fighting, he practically chopped off a finger.
Did he miss his mark or something? We did a different move, you know.
Yeah. And I think in the coming up scene, you'll see it's in the film, she actually did stab a stuntman.
Ooh.
You'll see it in a second because the way he moves, I'm not talking about deep stab, like she got him around the neck and she probably stabbed his jaw a bit.
Yeah.
Even watching this scene here, you automatically think, oh no, she's dead. But I thought this is where she was going to die, and I'm thinking, aren't they going to come back to save her? But then again, she doesn't need saving.
No.
In this context here, she didn't need it. That's what's so good about it. There's no fear of it. She's that so confident fighter. Because the music here reminds you of when Arnie's father got killed. Or he got,
it's a similar musical cue, isn't it? Yeah. And she's just showing off her confidence there, because she just like stops to sort of decide.
Here, bang, she actually got him in the jaw, I think.
Oh, yeah, you can see that.
I'm pretty sure she actually got him. Like, he's faking it, he's still doing the part, but he actually did get hit somehow.
Oof.
I noticed her gem sparkled for a split moment there.
Yeah,
that was animated.
That's right, yeah.
I don't know if it plays anything into it, but anyway. Help him. We haven't talked much about James Earl Jones in that respect.
Well, no, not really. I mean, obviously, no, because he was a last-minute sort of casting, wasn't it, for him? I don't know. I would have thought at the time maybe this kind of wouldn't have been his cup of tea, but I think playing this character and the dialogue, it really sort of, you know, it's very theatrical, isn't it? And it plays.
Well, I think he's more of a Shakespearean taught actor, so it is more up his alley. He likes mythological type things like Max von Sydow.
Yeah.
Where they play these type of characters because it goes back to the theatrical Shakespearean training.
Yes.
Where method actors like, let's say, Pacino, I don't think I've ever seen Pacino do anything close to this sort of a role.
No, I think so.
I mean, someone might correct me in the thing.
What about the Devil's Advocate?
No, it's different in context because that's like a businessman / devil. Where here, this is more eccentric. This is more Shakespearean, mythological character.
Yeah.
You could have taken this from Greek, Roman times. Seek.
I love that, you know. It goes in deep, though, doesn't it? It goes in deep because
it goes in very deep.
Yeah. Day for night.
And it's just like they're almost away.
Oh.
We mentioned this before in another commentary because it happened the year before, or is it the same year? Escape from New York. They used that.
81 Escape from New York.
81.
Yeah,
so they had access to that, let's say, but Escape from New York had the best lenses for night.
And yeah, they had the new lens that sort of you could shoot low level light. No, it's a very low, limited amount of light, and the lens would just, pour it in, and you could shoot nighttime scenes without having to do day for night. It made it down to the cost of it, or just down to
probably the location where they were. Like they probably didn't with Spain. Just pulling it out like the whole thing.
That's cool.
There are the real snake. Obviously, this context. I couldn't do it. I can't handle snakes. And they had that guy, Dr. Tiva, I think his name was. And he was a snake handler.
Snake handler, yeah, because everyone had to have their own snake, didn't they, to sort of be around? Because there were so many snakes on set, they had to sort of get everyone used to them. If one just goes around your neck and just sort of tightens, you'd be like, oh!
Oh, man. I'm sorry, I just had a flashback of Loaded Weapon. Cold, I'm cold. And he takes off the ice bags from her legs.
Yeah. I watched that the other week, actually, Loaded Weapon one. That was great.
That's fun. I don't know why people think, it wasn't that good.
I grabbed it on Laserdisc. It's good.
Oh, it's just so much fun to it. I can quote, jeez. It's one of those things, where do you want to... We've already done the bit where Bruce was rephrasing his role, but... Samuel L. Jackson just amazing with that. Not so fast. And then he goes, look, that's better.
We're doing Marco's like, that won't burn.
Yeah. Because of the wind and everything like that.
It just goes up.
And this is going back to what we kind of mentioned, like Conan's destiny, manifest destiny, was to destroy this. So you could say the gods, because there was a lot of mention of the gods won't let fire burn up there, whatever, because of the wind.
Yeah.
And the gods are in Conan, supporting Conan, like either be Crumb or the Four Winds. Because you could say the gods of the Four Winds are in this context.
I think he says, doesn't the wizard says, the gods are pleased with you, but they're not gonna.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not gonna get involved, but they're pleased.
They're not gonna get involved, but it's
Because I think Milius had said that Crumb had. Listened and brought him back, to defeat Thulsa Doom. Well, that's also, Conan doesn't cry. And also in the comics, like, the writers made an effort to not give many thought bubbles to Conan. Because you never really got inside Conan's head in the original books or weird tales or comic strip, the pulp novels. So in this, you don't... As well, there's moments where Conan sits down and is thinking, but you never know what's going on in his head. He never discusses how he feels.
Yeah.
And it works. That's a perfect adaptation of the character.
There goes the Wheel of Pain symbol.
Yeah.
So he's got something new to fight for. He's got something new to be upset about or whatever.
Yeah.
I love that. We didn't mention. I love the little speech at the end before when Conan came back, where she says, if I was dead and you were fighting and you needed me and I come back from the dead just for you. It just gives me goosebumps. Just the context of like that sort of deep.
Oh yeah, just further reinforces
like,
their relationship.
That's the other thing too. Like I mentioned before, it's such a small relationship, but you buy it. I don't know why it is about it. It works. Where in other films, you see other people in such a short time, you wouldn't believe it.
Because the film takes its time as well, and these little moments here, which he's still probably pining over her loss, but he's not showing it in his face. But also, Basil's score is a major tool in that.
Yeah, the best example would be like Vicky Vale from Batman. I never bought it.
No, I didn't know because there wasn't any chemistry. Really, I didn't buy the chemistry.
Yeah. This actress here, I don't remember if we mentioned it. She was a French actress. This one in particular. I'm just trying to remember her name. I got it somewhere. Valerie Quinessence. Quinessence. Yeah, Valerie Quinessence. She was French. Anyway, she'd been in Summer Lovers previously, I think before this, roughly maybe 81 or about the same year. And Basil, I think, did the score for that as well. She unfortunately died in like 89.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she died in a car crash. She was very young. She was like 29, 26, something like that. So this is that deleted scene I was talking about before. In the theatrical, this scene was cut.
It's a good scene. It sort of just further sort of shows that he has emotional side to him, and
yeah. It's not totally like he has that. It's not totally been removed. It's not totally been ripped out of him. With all the combat, he still remembers the better days. And I'm just trying to get my head around why would they delete it.
No, no, it's a good moment for Arnold.
And between his friend, between Subotai as well. It strengthens their bond.
Yeah, and it shows Conan's frustration with his life. He's just been bred for combat, and it's not to say he's kind of. I don't know, it may imply that he's kind of sick of it to a certain degree, but he had that moment of being able to move on. It's been taken away from him, and so he's now got to, finish it off. But as the film ends and sort of hints at what happens to Conan, he goes on for more adventures. So war is not forgotten. He's.
And even that last bit of sentence, that's so great. For us, there is no spring, only there is no rest, only the spring air that smells fresh. Like that's just, the whole thing's great for like a warrior like that.
Oh yeah.
Again, the music, so great. Can't go wrong with it.
Not at all. I think they did do a re-recording of it as well, which I don't think. Obviously, it's a cleaner recording, whatever. It's not a remaster. It's just literally re-recording it with another orchestra. Moments where it does sound great, but it doesn't quite have the sound of the film. There's slight differences, but yeah. Okay, there's a bit of comedy thrown in now.
Yeah, I was gonna say they bring a bit more of the comedy element to it. The God are pleased with you.
No.
costume design is great as well. Like, especially a lot of these warrior stuff. Again, it's back to
like, isn't it, as well?
It's also Asian motif. You got that very samurai-esque. So it could be. It's a mix of everything. That's what's so good about it. Ron Cobb did an amazing job. I mean, Ron Cobb was brought in to do Aliens, but he's been done so many things as well. Like, he got involved with designing the DeLorean from Back to the Future.
Did Last Starfighter.
Okay.
Yeah. But is it? He tried to create architecture that was kind of felt new, that you hadn't seen it before, but it felt familiar.
Ron's kind of famous for when his art, there's functionality to it. There's logic behind what he does. Yeah. So with the DeLorean, because before, if you look at the earlier designs of the DeLorean, I'm trying to remember the name off my head, but I never will, so I'm not going to try. The original designer did it too futuristic, where it was that typical 80s style, if you remember like some of the old style from the 80s, how they did like hoverboards and whatever. Yeah. It looked like that. And it wasn't clicking. And then they brought in Ron Cobb, and he kind of looked like, they said, okay, Doc did it via garage type thing, or what he could find in garage. He did it so well, and then they brought it back to that other guy to refine it. Right. And it's one of the things about Ron Cobb. He does designs that have a practical use to it, or some basis in reality. Yeah. So that's kind of the best thing about it. And that's why it works in here as well. Looking at James Earl Jones' mask, he looks just like whatever. It reminds me of Death Adder from Golden Axe.
Definitely, yeah. He's got very limited peripheral vision, isn't he? Wearing that. The hell with you, with...
The hell with you. Oh, this great little speech. Matters is that two stood against many. I've never prayed you before. Again, this is a great little speech for him. I have no tongue for you. Yeah. Valor praises you come. Not even you will remember if we were good men or bad. Why we fought. And if you do not listen, then the hell with you. Yeah, it's great. It's just it's wonderful because again, it's a character moment as well. You see a lot of it feeds into the character where he's like, he's got some fear of the gods, but even that, in the face of battle, he'll bugger off then. Yeah.
I love when this music just like pounds in now.
It is basically they've used this score. Probably this is the third time they used this score. Yeah, because this is the same score they used in the beginning.
Yes, it is.
And they used it in that, but it doesn't feel overused. Surprisingly,
no, it doesn't. No, you could argue it's a little bit limited on its kind of use of music in terms of like its kind of recycling themes, but it's music that just fits charging horses and battle.
Wow.
What do you think of Conan the Destroyer and the music for that? Because Basil did change the theme, didn't he?
He did change the theme. He brought back one or two themes, like the Valeria theme. He brought back. It's different. Yeah, I'll put it that way. It is different. It's good, not as good. I mean,
it's a bit more playful and a bit more. Yeah. Dun 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 dun. It's a bit more upbeat.
Sorry, I don't want to go any further than that.
This becomes a sing-along, doesn't it?
Well, no, it's good. I mean, they didn't bring back this theme, ironically.
Yeah, this is like, this music for this is more aggressive, and that's what fits the tone of the film.
The choir kicking in. I like this different tone here where it changes. This shift here is good. Yeah, it's good.
They pull out a lot of the music here, don't they? And there's still a little bit playing. It's a bit more playful now, isn't it? Where it's Subotai is kind of doing his thing now.
I remember that scene bothered I don't remember the name, not the MPAA, the Animal Society group. The previous one, they said, hey, the horse looked like it got injured. You injured a horse for that scene. Yeah. And their argument was, well, you saw a man fall into that Styx as well, didn't you? They say, yeah. Do you think we killed him? And they're like, oh, well, that was which is a good argument because the thing about it, they said, oh, the horse looks like it got killed. You guys killed the horse for this scene, which no animal should be harmed to make them film.
Yeah, because he fell first, so he went into the spikes. He went into the
spikes, and that was they were trying to file a lawsuit where these guys killed horses. And they said, well, you saw a man in the same shot. It was in one shot. You saw him roll into the Styx, didn't you? He says, yeah. Do you think we killed him? This is, well, no. That's how they beat it. But, yeah, they did have even issues back there. Like,
it takes out the horse's legs, doesn't he?
Yeah. What movie did that recently that was so much more brutal?
Oh.
Was it? It might have been Game of Thrones. I don't think it was Game of Thrones didn't even go that far.
This is a great moment here because they do like a trick, don't they? Because I think Arnie's going to attack, then they stab from the side.
Yeah.
Maybe it's already happened. I can't remember.
It might have happened. Yeah, we'll just talk. Ow.
Oh, I love the blood though. Just like you can tell, it's like blood bags where blood.
Oh yeah, it's a bit too thin. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not Die Hard thick,
No.
chunky, or RoboCop thick. It's the thin type blood where it looks like water. It's a little bit too thin in that. My spear. Here's that famous sound effect we were talking about.
Oh yeah. I love it.
He's got that smile. I know where you are. I just love the little bit of guts hanging out the back of him. There's that sound. That's just so cool. I love that sound. Ooh, a little bit of flesh at the back. Everything's gone quiet now. I just like that. Just you hear the wind though. It's just Thulsa. You're talking about his peripheral vision. He doesn't even fight. Why would he need it?
I love this fight here because Arnold just spins around, cuts his sword off, and then cuts his stomach open. Oh, it's brilliant.
Well, there's a tragedy in that respect where he cuts his stomach open, so he won, and then he breaks the sword. It's like, but I like this. This is so great. I love that.
Yeah, she comes in to save him.
It goes back to the idea of defying the gods. That goes back to Odysseus, from ancient Greece. Mythology, to defy the gods, and she defied the gods to come back to life as a Valkyrie to save the man. It's touching. It's one of those things where it's giving me like, give me that warm feeling. But I like here he's more focused on the music.
It's a shot of Arnold as he slowly approaches him. It's like that close up there.
That's Conan the Barbarian.
That's so
that's
good.
him. That's the real Conan, 100%. And this is the way he was taught in the fighting. It's all back. See, he won and then he broke the sword. It kind of breaks my heart.
Yeah, because that's his father's sword,
Yeah. But again, that goes back to the whole idea. The sword represents his anger in that respect. It represents everything why his family was killed. That final moment with his father.
I suppose you could reforge the sword, couldn't you?
Yeah, you could, but it'll never be the same. In this, see, that's Lord of the Rings stuff.
Isn't it? Yeah. Reforge the sword.
Yeah. I mean, that's possible, don't get me wrong. Well, actually, no, I won't say that's possible because probably a real sword expert or blacksmith will say...
actually, Michael.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't work because of this, because of that, but... See, okay, so I'm not going to act like I know everything about swords, but probably... Here we go.
Well, at least you've made a sword, Michael. Not many people can say.
Well, here's the thing. I always wanted to do it. Even back in school, I even remember telling my dad I want to make a sword. And everyone's like, and we had this big deal at high school. I remember this remember this quite well, where a number of older students in the higher grade, for their final thing, they made a sword. One of them made a sword. And it was so common where they say, we make a sword, and it was terrible. It was angle grinded. And eventually the teachers came out and says, look, no more swords, kids. I don't want to hear any more about, I want to make a sword, I want to make a sword. No one's ever completed one. No, they don't look good, and you don't follow through with it enough. And that kind of kicked into me and says, I bet I can do it. I never did it in school.
We never got a chance to make swords. If the DT teacher, whatever, said, you get to make a sword this...
I haven't heard that word in so long.
I know. You get to make a sword this summer or whatever, or this semester. You'd be like, fucking yes. I'm not sort of making a bloody pot or something,
Oh, yeah.
It's make shite in DT. It's awful.
No, I remember that.
I
remember that, the metalwork and all that sort of stuff. And I just remember a number of the older students were doing that. Nothing was good. They were all terrible. And eventually said, no more swords. No more. Because they were terrible. They were so terrible. I always said to myself, see, here was my logic. Because I remember even saying it to my dad. And I think one of the main reasons I said it to my dad, because Highlander 3 came out and they had that cool scene where he's building a sword.
Oh, yeah.
Even that, there are a lot of mistakes in that scene. And I just said to myself, I want to make a sword. And my dad kind of deterred me from it. He says, you know how hard it is to make a sword? And I just remember, even as a kid, my logic was thinking, well, hang on a sec. If people with less knowledge than I have 3,000 years ago could do something with not even close to the same tools, what's stopping me from doing it? That was my logic. And that's basically what I did to make mine. I said, okay, I'll do it step by step. Now, I basically did a cutout. I didn't forge it. I found a piece of metal. I cut it out. But what I basically did is I grounded it by hand. I did as much by hand as possible, so no machine tooling except for the engraving, where I did the words, suffer no guilt, you will, this is the name of crime. But everything else was hand done. The old wax tradition, the old wax method, where I carved the wax, and I did everything as close as possible. And I'm happy with the end result. A lot of people are always like, when people come visit, they say, "Oh, where's that sword?" Oh, we can have a look. And people show it off.
Did someone want to buy it off you, didn't they?
Yeah, I've had one or two offers. Someone wanted to buy it. I'd never sell it. It's the first one I ever made. But some people have asked, would I do a duplicate?
No.
If I had the time and the right facilities, I would do it. It was a different time in my life where I was like not working. I was at home. I was doing some other things. But anyway. But yeah, no, I was happy with the result.
You could have made a lockdown sword.
I would. I probably would if I was in that situation I was now, where I was locked down back home.
Stuck in Greece, you could do it.
Yeah, I could do that.
I said when I reviewed this movie, I felt that there could have been a little bit more of a confrontation between Conan and Thulsa Doom, and people disagreed with me. It wasn't like we weren't negative towards me. It's just like, oh, I disagree because I think this is a perfectly good moment, and it is a great moment. But it would have been nice to sort of see Thulsa Doom kind of challenge Conan with his powers.
He does with his powers. He does try to hypnotize him.
He does it. Yeah, but we've seen the potential of what he could do, like maybe to the full extent where because he turns into a snake. But there's also, but it would have fallen into maybe it's sort of very Harryhausen kind of thing, and more fantastical. But I think that people probably are right. I think
people had a point, and I'm looking at their point. I think they were right in what respect where. His villain is not so much a physical presence. He's a psychological. He's the guy that destroyed his life. He's the guy that... And what he is saying to Conan is actually quite accurate. Without me, you would not have existed.
Yeah.
And Conan is believing that, And what James Earl Jones is basically seeing here, he's potentially seeing a replacement for the two guys that he lost, for Sven and Rexor, the character of Rexor. That was more or less Darth Vader.
Yeah.
But again, he's 100% right. So that's the problem with a fanatic or whatever you call a spiritual leader in his case, where they have some point. They're not. I'm not saying they're right in what they're doing. Don't get me wrong. There,
it's a classic villain that they don't know they're the bad guys, or they don't think they're bad guys.
Yeah, and their basically argument has some validity.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, I can see their point in that respect. So in this context, even Conan's like he gets it, and he's trying to hypnotize him again with the blue eyes.
It's not working.
Yeah,
but
it's working.
Out of it,
but he snaps out. I think it's due to his father's sword in that respect. Like his father's sword has that symbolism.
Yes, good theory. Yeah.
So it's like I can see why it's not a physical conflict. I wouldn't have wanted to see cuts the sword in his hand. It breaks that spell. It brought Conan back to who he is.
I do love the attack. That's like this brutal, like boof, like
yeah. Again, the blood splat. Yeah, that watery blood. And just the chopping off the head, there's poignant to it as well. As brutal as it is, it's as R-rated as it is. There's a reason for it. You cut the head of the snake, and it's like, here is your God, here is your Messiah that you worshipped. What is he? A man. Yeah. Obviously, he wasn't. He had other things to him. But again, going back to what John Milius said, he probably belonged to another ancient race.
Yeah, and he's not indestructible. He's not a god.
Yeah,
he's a man.
Yeah. See, he's not a machine. He's a man. You got him. You hurt him. Amazingly, because both Arnie and Stallone, because came out in 1982, two great movies that really defined their career.
Yeah.
And with great soundtracks from two great composers.
Definitely.
Jerry Goldsmith and Basil Poliduris just side by side that year. It's like, 1982 must have been something magical in the air.
Oh, yeah, it's weird, isn't it? It's like all these films would have obviously kicked off in 81 with their productions, but it's but it's like that year, just like Hollywood got it right. They
in a lot of respect.
They've got a lot of films,
I miss that about
scripts commissioned.
I miss that about Hollywood in general. I miss that about films where people were willing to take chances. There was that era. It's like, okay, we don't know what we're doing, so let's do anything. Let's chuck spaghetti on the wall, whatever sticks. Where now they're like, well, we know comic book movies make money, so we're going to do a comic book movie. We know PG-13 makes the most money, so it's going to be PG-13. But there's no room for experimentation, and that bothers me a lot.
It's playing it safe, isn't it?
Because
these films are costing so much money. Yeah, that's what TV's kind of taken over again.
Yeah, TV, and rightly so. Like Netflix, and they're smart, where it's like people want to binge watch.
Yeah.
People would rather binge watch something because you do lose over if it's because of life, because someone says, look, I can't watch this show every Saturday night because that Saturday night I've got a high school reunion. I've got to work overtime. I've got to do this. Where it's like, okay, I can binge watch this on Sunday because I got my Sunday off. Going back to Conan thinking.
It's a great scene. It's a great way to sort of... Yeah, it does, you know, I think, yeah, you're definitely right about it not being as over the top for his confrontation because we've just had a big battle. You don't need another battle.
Well, not only that, he's right now, he's thinking, okay, I've done it. What's left?
Yeah, what's
I
left?
mean, you got to imagine if you had one goal in life, a lot of people say one of the worst things you could do is reach that goal. Where that's why you see a lot of these actors, whoever, like they struggle, and directors as well, when they're at that point where they're struggling, where they're at their weakest, they're struggling, they produce their best work, and then when they succeed, they kind of lose that eye of the tiger, going back to Stallone and Rocky, that they lose that edge.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the thing with Conan right now. It's like, okay, I've done that. What now?
It's interesting that the followers have all left. That you thought they may have seen Conan as this new king or this new leader of them, but she's the only one who stayed, and she kind of does she bow down to him, doesn't she? Or is it to him? Yeah. And he just like walks past her, just takes her with him to finish off his submission, as it were, the sort of secondary goal. To get his Xbox achievement,
Well, she's more familiar with him. Where basically to that crowd, some random person came up and chopped off his head. Why would you follow that person? You don't know enough. Where she knows more about him. Like she's seen what he's gone through, and she can see him as the next thing she wants to worship. That was a mistake. It was it mucked up.
Was it supposed
if I remember correctly,
was it
was
supposed
to go up.
Yeah.
And what happened is they actually did set the place on fire. And something happened like that where it was a mistake. Something was... it was supposed to land elsewhere. But because the fire got started, they couldn't redo it.
Oh, quickly had to go. Right.
Yeah.
Action!
See, this always got me confused. This whole thing's concrete, basically. How does it catch on fire?
It burns really quickly, doesn't it?
It burns like wood. Everything, just so the camera movement, the way he's walking down, it's so timed well. The music, of course. She's worshipping him. I guess that also goes back to Conan is more of a... Conan could have easily have been another like Thulsa Doom in that respect. He's that intelligent. He garners that much respect, and I think people can see that worthiness about him. There's something about him. He's not a follower. He's not a sheep. He's above that. That's why he becomes king by his own hand.
Yeah.
Something very rare in that context, where it's like... Where they mention it, Conan it becomes a king, but that will tell in another story.
It's a story we never got, which is a shame. I imagine the fans would have been so like excited for Conan the Destroyer and gone, a bit deflated by what they got, and it all just came crashing down. It's a shame really, because due to the success of this, you think they would have had John Milius doing more and more, and.
John Milius is weird because I think we mentioned... Because John Milius did Red Dawn a few years after this one, and people have said that that's kind of... Or he's even said as well, that kind of blacklisted him, killed his career, because they saw it like a very right-wing extreme view in that sense of World War III. And he painted like the Russians as villains at the time when the Cold War was coming to an end.
Well, he always refers to himself as a Zen anarchist, doesn't he?
Zen anarchist.
Yeah. But yeah, because Hollywood's left leaning, and he felt that he was, because of his views, he was kind of shunned from them. And he went into doing script writing behind the scenes, and being a script doctor.
He did one or two other. He did like Flight of the not Flight of the Navigator, Flight of the Intruder, I think it was.
Flight of the Intruder, not Navigator.
No. Flight of the Intruder, I think it was. Yeah, with the
But also, it's another thing that you shouldn't do in films. We're saying, we're going to do a sequel, we've set it up, and you're just like, well, you end up shooting yourself in the foot,
Not necessarily. It doesn't, because this is a standalone film, it's told it's a complete arc. So in this context, it's not a bad thing. It's like, wow, it's like the character lives on.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't put it so much to say like Conan will be back in Conan the Destroyer. Conan will be back in You Only Live 3 Times.
Conan will be back in A View to a Kill.
What else? Conan will be... Octopussy. Octopussy would have worked for this one. Anyway. But... And then you see someone else playing Conan. It's like, what?
Yeah.
It's not, yeah, it's like, I got the whole Roger Moore thing on.
Yeah. It's just too comical. What's going on? It's like...
Oh, man.
Jim Carrey is Conan the Barbarian.
Terry Leonard. Terry had a good... He had double for Harrison Ford in Indiana Jones.
Costume designer John Bloomfield. Oh, I forgot about that.
Okay.
Yeah, he worked quite a few Canon films.
That great score kicks in again. Music editor wrote it.
William Stout, production art. Fucking hell. William Stout. He did Masters of the Universe.
Wow. Well, I can see why they'd hired him, because a lot of time... That's the funny thing about Hollywood, like, especially if you're trying to break into other fields, if you do something, it really sticks in people's mind. They say, we want to do, like, because we do Master Universe, who does sword and sandal movies that we know? Hey, how about that guy? He did Conan. You know, they kind of use that logic, and sometimes it doesn't work. It backfires on them.
But I think in the case of He-Man, it kind of worked. I think, yeah. It's a good-looking film. Like, but the design of it, the concept work was incredible. But just what ends up on screen is not fully what William Stout did. Bob Penn worked on this, photographer. He did Superman, did the poster for Superman, and Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
It's funny that you kind of wish that Master Universe didn't bring it to the Earth. They would have stuck in Eternia. I think it probably would have worked. It could have been It could have been a kid's version of Conan, because the set design, everything looked good. Not as bloody. It could have been a PG-13, close to that. Had they kept it in Eternia and had it look like the way they had it here, the way they're setting here, I think it probably could have worked very well to its favor. Yeah,
definitely. Would you be up for doing the commentary for Conan the Destroyer?
I got no problem with that as well. I get a few laughs out of that. I especially get, I always get a laugh out of Grace Jones every time. I'm just so amazed by Grace Jones. I love her, and in that movie as well, she's just so much fun. Yeah, and she was really hitting people in the head with that one. And just the bit again, going back to the comic when it doesn't work. When she sees the rat and she jumps up screaming, and everyone's looking at her like, and she like shrugs her shoulders like, oh. I wouldn't mind Conan the Destroyer. Why not? I mean, there are a lot of good things going on about that movie as well. Like again,
there's still a lot talked about in that film. I think
it's not a bad film. And here's the funny thing is,
it's just a missed opportunity. I think
it's a missed opportunity. And the good thing is, you can still watch it now. There's nothing that deters it, that ages it. Said, oh, it's so stupid. I don't want to see it.
Well, this film also actually, because we're going through the credits, there's it doesn't have Dolby stereo. It was a mono movie. Which is kind of, by 82, all the big movies had Dolby Stereo.
I always remember that Jaws was the big one that did it in mono. Like the big, that's the one that really is like, everyone's like, everything was so on par, except whose bright idea was it to do mono?
Yeah, it wasn't until like really Close Encounters where Dolby Stereo kind of appeared, I think, and Star Wars kind of made it a big deal and things like that. But yeah, that was the early days of Dolby Stereo. But it was stereo, other options, but mono is just a cheaper way to do it.
I think even the cartoon Voltron was the first cartoon to introduce stereo.
Really? Wow.
I think so. I don't quote me on that, but I'm fairly certain. I think that was one of the first cartoons to introduce the concept of stereo.
Wow. There you go, folks. Well, Conan, fantastic movie still. Really good film. Love it to bits. One of the, up there, one of the best movies of 82, and it still has one of the best scores ever made.
Definitely. I can listen to that soundtrack so easy.
Well, everyone, that's the end of the commentary. Hope you enjoyed it. Me and Michael will be back with some more very soon. Take care of yourselves and goodbye.
See you, everyone. Cheers.